Okay, the mics are live, and it is 5:32, so if everybody could find their seats, please.
Chris, the thing is up there. Yeah. What do you do, black it out? Where'd he go?
Yeah, sure.
We're not ready anyway.
Right.
So we'll bring that back.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely. Sure, sure. Council members, if you could find your seats, please. Here we go. I got 4, so we can start. Okay, good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. If you could all please rise for the invocation. Pastor Russ Wynn with the Springs of Bonita Springs. Hello.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello. Let's bow our heads, please. Father, we just ask your blessings to rest on our meeting today on the City Council. Thank you for the men and women who give of their time, their energy, their talent to serve in this capacity. And Lord, we just pray, God, as the storm is barreling down on us, we pray, God, that you would somehow move that out to the Atlantic. And just pray your protection on Florida, on our community, the first responders. Pray your protection on all of us. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you.
Councilman Schlachter, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
It'll be an honor, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba?
Here.
Councilman DeWitt? Councilman
Here.
Slachta? Mayor Simmons?
Here.
Councilman O'Flynn?
Here.
Councilman Gibson? Councilman Forbes?
Here.
Well, good evening, everybody. How are you?
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening, Mayor.
We are now going to move along to public comment on agenda items. If there's members of the public who would like to come forward, please do so at this time.
What? Nobody?
Goodness, it's going to be an easy meeting.
Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to proclamations and presentations. Item A is a presentation relating to the recent excessive rain event and action taken thus far.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to lead off if I might. First off, I just want to, I know a number of the council members have been involved in providing on-the-ground support to residents during our recent flooding event. And we appreciate that very much, but I have to tell you also that we are very thankful for the staff we have, because I will tell you, numerous employees from Parks and Recreation, from Communications, Neighborhood Services, Public Works, were out in the field, handing out notices, working with the individuals, reaching out for help for our residents, and I'm just thankful for them. And believe me, I mean, we had people out there who their normal job is a lifeguard, and they were out in the street, and they answered the call for all hands on deck. And so I want to thank the staff for doing that.
Can we do a round of applause, please?
That would be wonderful. Yeah. In the midst of all of that was our liaison to the county with regards to emergency management, Chris Campbell. And Chris, if you'll step up. Chris will be giving you a brief presentation on our efforts in the flood, what happened and when. And then behind Chris, we would also like to invite up, when Chris is finished and any questions from council are finished, we'd like to invite up Terry Lemaine from the Bonita Assistance Office, who has been just unbelievably great in all of this. I think worked all weekend long and put the offices and the resources of their offices in line with helping our residents. And then Jill Palmer from the Red Cross, who has been involved in actually one event and potentially the next event as well. So we'd like them to come up after Chris and say a few words as well. if council's okay with that.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Great.
Chris? Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Chris Campbell, City of Bonita Springs Neighborhood Services, Acting Director. As you guys are aware, there was excessive rainfall, and that severely affected some of our low-lying neighborhoods. I wanted to give you a brief review of the city's action plan. The first part of our plan was to maintain awareness, and then our second phase of the plan was activation. Incident event impact, that's the actual flooding that occurs, and response, recovery, and mitigation to damages to the affected area. Maintaining awareness of the storm is not just simply us being aware, it's situational awareness and also keeping the public aware of any information that might assist them in preparation. Consistent coordination with local media to ensure that they're informed and up to date. Reporters were sent with officials and staff as they assessed. The City of Bonita Springs sent e-blast to notify residents how they can connect with emergency operations, Bonita Springs Fire Control Rescue Districts, and Lee County Sheriff's Office. All staff was notified of resources to ensure callers were pointed to the correct resources. City media was updated to support that messaging as well. In addition to assist in getting that message out to the public, Mayor Simmons had a conference call and meet and greet with the governor, and also met with our local representative of the fire department. The next phase is activation, or was activation. Staff coordinated resources on the ground in conjunction with Emergency Operations Center. City staff hand-delivered notification warnings to residents of the low-lying area to keep them informed and up to date to expect additional flooding. City staff assigned assisted in placing temporary road closure signs due to flooded streets as well to protect the public. City staff also assessed the damages on the ground, the flooding. This is just some photos of staff delivering notices to assist the public and let them know where they can get additional resources and what they can expect. This is your Public Works Department closing Quinn Street. One of the last phases is response, recovery, and mitigation of damages to the affected areas. This is where we coordinate with EOC, 211, our local partnering agencies, Bonita Assistance, Red Cross, Salvation Army. They're key in getting the recovery phase and mitigation going. Mayor Simmons was out there in hand. City staff were out there. Everyone pulled together to assist and mitigate damages, as well as assist in recovery and response. That phase is still occurring today. The recovery phase, as you know, is going to take some time, provided there isn't any additional rainfall. And those agencies will be there to assist those individuals to get back to normal. And now, that was last week. This week, we are faced, unfortunately, with Hurricane Irma. And the plan then restarts. We maintain awareness of potential incidents of the storm. Staff is in contact with partnering agencies to monitor the storm. Staff has contact with local public information officers. This is key to get a unified message out as not to confuse the public. We've currently we started our activation phase. We have completed phase 1 and 2 of the city's emergency management plan. and we have moved into phase 3, which is our mobilization. This includes ensuring all necessary storm preparations are in final stage and complete. Employees are in direct contact with their supervisors, and we're planning re-entry. Our key partner, in addition to the local agencies, is our Lee County EOC. Lee County Emergency Operations Center is now at a level 1 full activation today, and are coordinating with all partners at all levels. We urge to monitor local news stations and review leeeoc.com to keep up to date. And that's it. Any questions?
Council? Questions of Chris?
Just a comment. There was a great article in the Banner regarding Citrus Park, and Councilman here was Assistant City Chief, I should say. DeWitt said that he was bringing in. They were bringing in home nurses. I mean, it's so many things you don't think about. People on dialysis needing medication and all that. But that was good that the Bonita Springs Fire District did that because you forget about they're all alone. And they got to have somebody that normally comes to their house 2-3 times a week or whatever.
Yeah.
So, nice job.
If I may add to that, 211 is a good resource to triage those calls. They have a bank of resources available, and they know who best is suited to assist with that, including other partners who are just coming on board. Thank you.
Council?
I have one, and I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, but it's becoming more of an outside possibility than a strong possibility, but Irma, we're probably going to at least get some winds out of it, even if it goes up the other coast. Are we making, or could we make a concerted effort to help those residents get all the stuff that they got piled out, that they've thrown away, out of there so it doesn't become airborne during the storm? We got a few days to work on it. I'm sure Carl's got a plan anyway.
That is actually part of our activation phase. So we are monitoring construction sites. We are monitoring those streets that were affected. Lee County Solid Waste was out there as recent as today to continue to pick up as much debris that they can, so that there's no further effect. So we're monitoring all those locations to try to mitigate damages.
And I'll just add, I was down at Quinn Street again today, and most of it was gone. I didn't do maybe a complete inspection of every block, but most of it has been removed. But I know that's not the only area of town where there's going to be debris, so.
Correct. Yeah, we're monitoring locations citywide
Right.
with the staff.
Right. Amy?
No, I was just going to say thank you for all the efforts that everybody made, but I just wondered if there's a provision to do a post-mortem after we've gone through these periods where we're intensely focusing on the event, because there's always, room for improvement. And just my interaction with people in my district, I found that we could do a little bit better on the communication, so I'd like to follow up on that when we go through this next one. And my second point is, could we focus on areas, I know is the obvious answer is the reason we got the flooding is because we had the rain, but there were, I think, other, like within our own community, we had like drainage blockages that created some flooding, so that there might be some procedures that we could do preliminarily to get the various areas of the city better prepared on an ongoing basis, not just when an event comes on, if we could identify those things.
No, and I guess I'll piggyback on that, because I've heard that a couple of times, and whether it was true or not, I've had a couple of people say, Peter, this could have been avoided if the drainage ditches, had been cleaned out and were free of sticks and debris. Neither here nor there, I don't know, but I just know that I have heard that same thing. I know certainly over on Paradise, I heard that from a couple of folks, for sure. So guess what? Shame on us if that's true. So let's find out.
Well, we have found out, Mayor, and the fact of the matter is that the maintenance of the stormwater conveyance systems in the city were not hampered by anything that was not particularly mowed. What the problem was is that you had every water conveyance system in the city at full capacity and beyond. And once the river busted its banks, the low-lying areas got the worst of it. Now, I know everybody talks about the 1995 flood, and the river at that point was a 13.2 was the elevation of the river in 1995. Here it was 13.21. So we were actually had the river at a higher elevation than in 1995. And so the water only has so many places to go. If those places are full, if they're blocked, I mean, a good point, they shouldn't be blocked, then it just backs up, and that's an unfortunate thing. Now, as far as gated communities, I mean, the city does not typically monitor those. It is up to the CDDs or the HOAs, however they're structured, to typically handle those kinds of things. Obviously, if they have questions about, you know, that the city might be able to assist in terms of any advice or assistance on that, we can do that. But again, those are private property areas, and we don't typically get involved in those. However, you know, I think it benefits us all to work together on those things, because what might be blocking in a public area might create problems in a gated community, and vice versa. So we take that very well. Lessons learned. So I will tell you the number one lesson we learned from the flooding issue a week ago, and I think partially it had to do with the way that the system was structured. Nobody activated any emergency operation centers. And so we were really, at least in the first part of the event, we felt we were kind of on our own. Now, the county, you know, stepped in and did assist us later, but I will tell you, as early as Tuesday of last week, I called Terry Lemaine at the Bonita Assistance Office, and I said, you are an expert at helping people find resources to resolve their problems. We are not experts at that. I mean, we can try to deal with the flooding and block off streets and try to communicate the best way we can with our residents, but we needed kind of the social service touch in the flooding. And I will tell you that Terry stepped up, created a system. The assistance office was amazing in this. She got the other agencies involved, whether it be the Red Cross, Salvation Army, United Way, but I will tell you that, and we'll hear from Terry in just a minute, but I will tell you that the communications were disjointed during that event. And I would say they were disjointed between the city, the fire district. Everybody was working to help the residents, but we weren't always on the same page as to who was doing what when. So we learned that. And of course, we learned it, and we've already applied it to the event that's coming. And so that's a good thing.
And that's why Laura's going to be at the fire district office on, at the headquarters?
Yeah, you will have, Chris will be at the EOC at the county. Arlene and Laura will be assigned to the local EOC at Station 4 on Bonita Grant, okay? And I'll be out wandering around, so they'd have to find me somewhere. But anyway, so that's, the rest of the staff that are essential to be here during the storm will probably be located in City Hall until it gets to the point, if it gets to the point where it's too dangerous to still be here, then we will relocate to over onto Bonita Grant, is what we're looking for, okay?
The entire city staff?
Just the ones who are required to work during situations
Gotcha.
like this, okay? So we did learn things. We always want to try to do that and apply it. If we can always do communication better, we want to do that as well. So anyway, does council have any more questions of Chris?
Yeah, counsel?
Other than thank you.
Yep, thank you.
I would piggyback on one thing. We said that one problem we had was the emergency center the county had didn't activate in the beginning of this. Maybe we need to take a lesson here and come up with our own mini emergency center between fire district and police and all that, because you could have something here that wouldn't warrant them. Could be anything from another flood, could be a hazardous material spill, could be a large airplane crash, but not too big to get emergency center up I think think it should be pursued.
Okay, any other questions for Chris?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Great
So
job.
much,
We
Chris.
appreciate
Very
that.
good job.
Oh, he had boots, believe me. So did the mayor.
Eventually,
So,
I got him.
eventually. I would like to take the opportunity now to introduce Terry Lemaine from the Bonita Assistance Office, who did, like I said, just a yeoman's job on this, and she wants to say a few words. Terry?
Thank you, City Manager Carl, and thank you, Mayor and City Council, and thank you, everybody behind me. One thing I can say is this team came together, starting from the top. Our Mayor, Peter Simmons, all the partnering agencies, your United Way, the City of Bonita Springs staff, the media. As Carl said, I was kind of like the bullseye. Everybody came to us, but I disseminated to action, and everybody worked together. Just left the office about a few moments ago. We've been in operation answering the telephones with a live person for 10 days straight now. We had 18 households come into our agency today. 10 of them utilized the emergency food pantry, which includes supplies. And we were also able to give out Visa gift cards and Publix gift cards to particularly those that have lost wages over the past 10 days of this event, children with special needs, the elderly, and the medically necessary. We are jointly vetting those residents with the American Red Cross and our local United Way. Our agency will be open tomorrow with a full staff, bilingual, and 4 volunteers. So we urge residents in Bonita that need food, supplies. We have flashlights and batteries. Don't know if I should say that because that could be a hot commodity right now. But I do want to thank everybody. Councilman Fred Forbes came out yesterday and Mayor Peter Simmons. We disseminated over 8,000 pounds of food, thanks to the owner of the Flamingo Island Flea Market for allowing us to come in and put up a mobile food pantry. Those 8,000 pounds of food was distributed to 157 households in the flooded area of Edith, Downs, Quinn, Dean. But most of all, I just want to say this is a great city. The support from the donors, the partnering agencies, many of them are in the room behind me. Jeff Clark from Salvation Army, Joe Palmer from the American Red Cross, and just everybody. The city really came together. This was a wonderful week. It's been a tiring week, but the Bonita Springs Assistance Office will be there to help in an unexpected crisis.
Great. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, and I just want a personal thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
We live in a wonderful city. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you, City Manager.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, I'd also like to introduce Jill Palmer. She's with the Red Cross, and she's going to have a few comments about what they did in the flooding and what they might do with Irma.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
City Manager.
Hello, Jill. It's
Mayor?
been Sunday
Yes.
since about 10:30, right?
Yes, we
nice
were
to see you again.
roaming the streets, and we
Yes.
ran into the mayor out there, so it was lovely to run into you. Thank you. My name is Jill Palmer. I'm the Executive Director for the American Red Cross for our Florida Southern Gulf chapter, which covers Lee, Collier, Hendry, and Glades. So we have a chapter office in Fort Myers as well as in Naples. So it is our pleasure to serve the residents of our counties. The American Red Cross on Sunday, August 27th, activated our local operations center when we received word from the emergency management that we were going to have some flooding. So we actually stood up 2 shelters on Sunday, August 27th, one at the Dunbar Middle School and one at the Estero Parks and Rec. For Sunday evening, we didn't have anybody reside with us at Dunbar, so we deactivated that shelter. But the Estero Parks and Rec had 2 residents that came in around 2:30 a.m. Monday morning, and our shelter population actually has gotten up to as high as 129 on Wednesday evening. I will tell you that shelter is still open and active. We currently have 49 residents in that shelter at Estero Parks and Rec. We will continue, the American Red Cross will continue to run that shelter, until at which point we have to transition those residents to a hurricane evacuation shelter. So we are working very closely with Lee County EOC to determine when that might happen, because that area is not an evacuation shelter. So those residents will, if they choose not to go home, they will then transition to an appropriate facility. Our volunteers have been hard at work this past week. They have provided all of the damage assessment, going to all the affected areas, confirming who had water damage, and then also we had a team of volunteers who have gone out in our emergency response vehicles, handing out cleanup kits and water. We had a gracious donation from Harry Chapin. We were providing some non-perishable food goods, and we also, as Terry reported, have been having regular, almost daily calls with United Way partner agencies, and I can't say enough wonderful things about the work that Terry has done in your community. You're blessed to have her representing your community. But we are still working on how we can help those residents. Most of them have come from the Saldivar mobile home community. Their community is still flooded, and access in and out is a challenge. We also had Lee County Public Schools drive through there to see if it was accessible by bus. They did determine it is not. The children would have to be picked up on Bonita Beach Road. And so there are concerns from the residents there that the children would have to walk through water. We were fortunate to work with United Way, and we did share purchasing boots for everybody that would like to go home and be able to come in and out of their park. Some did take advantage of that, and some did not. Our volunteers are still providing casework in the shelter. We brought in a team from the East Coast, a bilingual team, which we have had bilingual volunteers working in there, but these actually staff from the Red Cross trained in casework and recovery, so we could meet individually one-on-one with each of those families in the shelter, working with them on a recovery plan, to actually help get them transitioned out. And we are still waiting on final confirmation of where our hurricane shelters will be. The American Red Cross does have a memorandum of understanding with the EOC that we will open one shelter per county. The county will open the rest of those shelters. Any questions for me?
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Council?
Good.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having me.
Mr. Mayor, I just have some final thoughts. We obviously have Irma on the way. While the information that we have right now is better than it was certainly 24 hours ago, we are not out of the woods yet. We are likely to still feel effects from the hurricane. So everyone needs to be cognizant. Please be aware, be looking for information, and don't hesitate to ask for help if you need it. There's a lot of, as you've already heard, organizations out there ready to assist those in need. So I appreciate that. Now, I've just been informed that the Salvation Army is here. Mr. Mayor, would you like to have that representative come up?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, please. Welcome. How are you?
It's good to be here.
Nice to see you
It's
again.
good to see you again. Yeah, it was very encouraging to be out and in knee-deep water. The mayor saved me in a truck, actually. They came up with a couple of our finest, actually. So it's good to be here. In regards to what the Salvation Army did during the flooding, we gave out over 225 bags of food. We focused on the essentials that people would need. Also, water. On Saturday night, we went out to the Edith Oakland Downs area and were able to provide a hot meal for all the residents there. We had been in contact with them, and we were asking if this was something that they would like provided for them. We had gotten 75 respondents were positive, and we decided that we would prepare for a lot more. And the one thing that's important about these organizations, and you've heard from both the Red Cross and Bonita Assistance, is that they're not in our buildings. We are out, we are walking in the community. One of the most important things we recognize is that there is a hidden population in Bonita Springs, and they are the ones that sometimes need our help the most. And we are all out there, and we are not just, we are meeting with people, seeing eye to eye, and asking them exactly what they need and trying to meet them where they are. We also gave out a lot of paper products, things like toilet paper, paper towel, a lot of laundry detergent, and we actually gave out over 2,500 diapers over this period. One of those things that you may not think about right away, but especially for the health of the children, having access to clean diapers is an important thing. So that was what we were doing right now in terms of transition. We were actually both partnering. I don't know if they mentioned it, but with the United Way as well, both Bonita Assistance and the Red Cross, we're helping to administer a fund for all of the people that were affected by the flood, whether that be helping with deductibles on their insurance or help cover the costs of things that were damaged during the flood. We will be helping to administer that, take in people, and assess what needs they may have and go through the vetting process as well. So that'll be happening. Now the plans for that have been delayed, of course, because of the storm. They'll revisit that, I'm sure, next week once we get a better idea of what we're looking at. So
Great. I just want to say thank you very much. Great to see you again.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you
is.
to you and your team.
yeah.
And council, any thoughts?
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you very much.
God bless you all.
Back to you, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for everything you've done and will do moving forward. Okay, we're going to move on to item B now. Listen to a presentation on the Dixie Moon with Sam Vincent. That's going to give us some opportunities and provoke some thoughts and provide direction to staff. Hello, Sam.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, Council. Good to see you again. This is going to be a happy little project. It won't be what the storm is bringing us, but I think it'll be a nice project. We're sort of chipping in here with keeping business going. And it has to do with the Dixie Moon Cafe. And I have some slides for you. Let me tell you that I don't have any handouts for you to look at, but I can get those to you. I'm hoping that tonight we can make a decision on where we want to place this building on the site. It's not really difficult, and I think you'll enjoy this presentation. These are two plans here that I've come up with. The one on the left is setting the Dixie Moon Cafe to the rear of the property. It's going to be across the street from the Lyles Hotel and next to the existing laundry. And then the slide on the right shows the Dixie Moon Cafe on the street on Old 41 Road. The reason for the two is that the one on the right represents what we require in the urban core for buildings to be placed on within 12 feet of the property line, whereas the one on the left is a chance to look at creating a little plaza right there at the foot of the bridge in the beginning of downtown. So let's take a look at some of these in perspective. The view scheme one is what I'm calling the building being placed on the rear of the site. This is a view from the Old 41 Road and Wilson Street intersection. So if I'm standing across the street, this is what I begin to see at that corner. The building is located at the rear of the property to create an inviting plaza. Advantage one is that it opens the northwest corner of Wilson Street and Old 41 for the best views of the building and the new plaza from the street, sidewalk, and the bridge. And I think that's really important for that location to sort of open that corner up as it is now. And I think if you drive by there, you get an appreciation for how the openness is a nice look to the city when you've got so many buildings that are stacked one against the other. Advantage two is it creates a forecourt and a welcoming gesture to visitors to the building via a walk-through plaza. Advantage three is it provides an amphitheater and an open pergola structure for presentations, a meeting place for visitors, and an easily found orientation point to begin a tour of Bonita Springs. So it's the plaza is to create a gathering place. It opens the entire plaza to the Lyles Hotel and the Imperial River. The existing sculpture and the directory sign would remain, and it connects directly to the proposed outdoor cafe on the south property line. Al Engel plans to develop a cafe on the side of that building. The disadvantage one is it requires a deviation from the land development code, The regulations for placing building in the urban core requires that the first floor of the building be set back from the property line a maximum of 12 feet. The disadvantage, too, is it requires the city to consider additional funding for the plaza and its amenities. So when you push the building back there and you put it in place, it wants a plaza, and it depends on the council to decide whether or not that's where you want to put your funds. And here's a larger view of that corner. See if I can get the light to work on this thing. Right here. Okay. This is the laundromat right here. This is the sign. This is the amphitheater beyond. We have a pergola here in the building as it appears now. The building I have shown in this rendering is white, but of course can make it any color they want. This is scheme one still. It's an aerial. The other was a street view. This is an aerial or bird's eye view. A view from 041 Road, the buildings to the rear of the property, and it shows the, the amphitheater here. It shows a pergola right here. This is a sculpture that's there now, and then the existing directional sign is there. And this is what is proposed for the cafe next door. And you see it's a real nice plaza. It's small, but yet it's a very nice plaza, and it would be a nice addition to that corner. But I think when you see the next, you'll agree the next one is just as nice as this. It's a really difficult decision to pick one over the other. This is drawing 3, which is at ground level from the cafe looking across the plaza to the Dixie Moon. That's a larger view. What I'm doing is giving you a small view with the verbiage and then a larger view to follow so you can see the whole thing. This is scheme 2, and this is where we put the building within 12 feet of the property line, which is right there. The advantage of this is the building takes precedent over the plaza concept on the site. It gives a better sense of scale achieved for the pedestrian. It aligns with other adjacent and existing buildings to create a direct dialogue with the other facades on the block, a visual continuum that creates a coherent whole for a collection of buildings. And you can see how that really works, all in the same line. So it just creates that continuum. I think the advantage 3 would be visitors will be drawn to the building's use, experiencing the plaza via access through the structure. You have to walk through this to get to the plaza in the rear, if we want a plaza in the rear. The existing sculpture would be moved, but the directory sign would remain. The disadvantage is that it hides the proposed cafe from direct view of the intersection. It creates a corridor between the two buildings, the cafe and the Dixie Moon, and it creates sort of an alley. It renders the plaza concept unnecessary, I think, and not related to the building's use currently. When we find out what we want to put in the building, then we can decide whether or not we want a plaza or something else in the rear. Let me give you a larger view of that. It's really a nice view. The amphitheater's right there, and the sculpture is right there as well. The existing sign remains there, but you can see the continuum as you walk along the street. All the buildings are tied together, and they all are about the same age, so they do relate. And this is an aerial view of the scheme 2. You can see that it creates a nice place in front of the building here, as the other buildings do. You can see the plaza in the rear. So I think that those are the 2 schemes that we do have for it, and depending on what you'd like to do, we can decide tonight, or we can put it off and let you study it a little longer.
Great.
And that's it.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Maybe I'll just get us kicked off here. They're both beautiful. I think when you look at the, if you could go back to where the building was at the rear of the property.
Okay.
Well, there's just more than one choice there, but yeah, maybe that one. Or, yeah. That looks pretty inviting from the street. And when you think of, and of course we all know where this is.
Right.
I think it gives a sense of space there that would pick up the park that's already there at the Lyles Hotel. It would invite people into that block. I just think it looks nice near the street, don't get me wrong, but I just think, how many towns or downtown areas do you drive down and see a nice little park like this sitting? And I think if we were to put the building at the front, I just think this, whatever we put in the rear of the building, that would be closer to the Lyles, I think it would get lost. I just think it would be more, I don't know, I just don't, it wouldn't be as obvious.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be as utilized. I mean, maybe eventually, but when you're driving down the road and would see that from Old 41, I think that's pretty inviting.
Well, you know what's interesting is when you come across the bridge going south, when you get to the toe of the bridge, you look to the open area there that's there now, and you'll be doing the same thing. And you tend to look there or at Benson's Grocery, but an openness on that corner sort of respects that corner and creates a nice large view. And then if you pan, you'll pick up the Lyles Hotel courtyard right there.
Right.
And of course, if the cafe is developed, then views straight across to the Lyles and the river are available to you.
Well, it's asking you to come in.
It
right?
is.
It's
That's
saying,
what I
it's
like
saying
about it.
hello. It's an invitation to turn in there and not keep driving by.
Now, you know, I mentioned that buildings in the urban core are to be set back 12 feet. But if an owner creates an activity that ties the street to the building, they're allowed to do that, such as at Louis, at what is it called, the outdoor outdoor kitchens. Created a little bench right there, and it links and ties into his display in the rear there. This works the same way. So having to deviate from the ordinance, I think you can say that this is our way of inviting the public into the building back here, and that would be acceptable, and it would not be an exception.
Right.
Yeah,
Council Pete.
I agree with Peter. I think it activates that space, and I think when you move it up, you have a dead space in the back. So I'd be inclined to agree.
Now, all of the elements in here are yet to be decided. I was showing this artistic standpoint of what would be nice to have in there, but I think from this point forward, we can look at many other things and how we want to use that plaza, particularly when we decide who will be in the building. So these things are movable. They are also adaptable. They could change out for something else. You may not want a pergola there, may not want an amphitheater, but these are elements that you would find in any small park. And the amphitheater, I think, is very nice because it gives a place to be. When you come to the park, you know where to go. And we know we have tours in Bonita Springs, that's a great place to start that tour.
Right. Right.
So it has both parks will have nice attributes to that, and it's really nice the way that it connects to the cafe in an open way. Right now, there's a picket fence between that property and the laundromat. So we take that down and invite people to go back and forth. So it would help both the business and it would help getting a service to the people in the park as well.
Right. Right. Council, Fred.
Is there any inherent higher costs over one of these layouts than the other?
No, they're both the same for the building. And that cost is the same as it was when we first got into this project. I think it's $142,000, $143,000. It's $83,000 to move the building. We would have to put in a slab, water, and make it meet code.
Where on this rendering? Where's the entrance for the vehicles?
In the same place that it is now.
Okay.
They would go around and park in the back.
Okay.
So again, for those that are not bicycling or walking, you do have some parking spaces in the rear.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Great. Fred, you okay?
No, I'm happy with
Amy?
it.
No, I like the setback rendering, and I like the idea of a plaza, and I think it would really enhance that open-air cafe, because who wants to sit in an alley, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
I hope that that's, soon to be developed, and that it's not just a dream. And I like the amphitheater point of that. Well, you could have that in either place, but I agree with the mayor. Why would you want to have an amphitheater in the back with all the cars, So
Right.
it's much more useful going forward. And then and then as you say, if we go this direction and we develop it, we could think about, I think we had an email saying, let's have shade, and somebody didn't like the name, so we could do that over time.
Right. Well, if you put the plaza in the rear, I think you'll find more people going to the rear of the building and then going into the Dixie Moon or Good Bread instead of enjoying a nice, small, intimate plaza right here.
Right.
So, if you like, we can.
The street, too. We want them to stop there and keep going. We don't want to just go to the back. I think
That's right.
Be more inviting in the front. So I'm in favor of that setback scheme.
Okay.
Yeah, and the word's probably not confusion. That's the wrong word, I know that, but I'm famous for using wrong words. But what it does, it creates another, how do I want to say this, juxtaposed situation there, which causes people to move around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
agree.
In different
I agree.
directions, and I like that.
I agree.
Steve, did you?
I'm okay with either one.
Okay. Okay.
You're not Pisces, are you?
I'm a Pisces. I'm a Pisces, but I'm an opinionated Pisces.
Well, do you want, council with a nod of the head, or do you want to make a motion? But I'd just to say with a nod of, I'd like it in the rear of the lot there.
Okay, so
Second and
we,
nod of the head.
we are looking for formal direction from council, but I'd like to make just a bit of a clarification. So our agreement with the developer is that they're going to supply $140,000, and they're going to write us a check, and we're going to move the building. Assuming we don't find something horrible in the building that we didn't know about, that could accomplish that move and putting the slab in, probably running some utilities inside.
Right.
So it may not be, what you're seeing now may not fall within that $140,000. We may have to look at some additional appropriations to make that vision a reality, just so the council's aware.
Okay.
As we do at Riverside Park, we have, you can buy bricks. That's one way of doing some things here, too.
That's right.
Exploring that sort of thing with whatever use that we use. But I think, all in all the points of access tie into the plaza across the street, the park, and here, and of course, access right through here to the sidewalk, I think really works well structurally. It makes a lot of sense. So I agree with your choice.
Great.
Just for clarity here, Carl, we're approving the concept today. You're going to come back to us with the pricing, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely, yes.
Great.
Good.
Anybody okay? Anybody?
Thank you
Anybody
very much.
violently shaking their head sideways?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks very much.
So
Thanks.
just
To
for
the rear
one
of the
more
lot, young man.
One
Thank
more
you.
clarification for staff, though, sorry. So are you not just making the decision about setting the building back? Are you looking for that vision right there to become reality?
I think that's a nice vision.
I'm hearing council say yes
Yeah.
to that. but-
Yes,
Sure,
yes.
sure,
Okay, very good.
absolutely.
Thank you.
If you wanted to move the pergola, whatever, have at it, but I think what we're looking at there is pretty nice.
Yeah, the pergola is, if you look at the center line coming out of the door for the building there, it lines up right in line. So when you leave the building and walk out, you're walking to the pergola. This pergola does not have a cover on it. It's a true pergola, and it's out in the outdoors. So if it's raining, you have to have an umbrella. But I didn't think it would be great to cover it. It's difficult finding covers for these things.
Right.
And it's a maintenance problem. So this thing, we have two gathering points. One is the pergola, the other is the amphitheater. And I also heard a suggestion from someone about putting a porch on the front of the Dixie Moon. And it indeed had a porch out there, but
Well, with those historic photos that were circulated this
Yeah.
past week, it did, right, when it was the
Yes,
mobile
it
gas
did.
station?
it did.
It
And
had a front bay or a front, right?
Right.
That's right. Cars could pull under and get gas. But, if you have these amenities here, you might not need that. You have the awning here. I don't know if a porch on this thing would do anything for us that this building does now. Porches are usually for sitting, you know, and you have to make them wide enough. You have to come out, you can add on to the building. It's going to add some cost to that to bring a porch out 7 or 8 feet and cover it. It is shade, but there's other ways to get shade. I like the purity of the building the way it is now. You know, you get a chance to see at the corners of the building these little stylizing of the parapet there. If you put a canopy over it or a porch, you're going to hide those things.
Right.
And the porch, I think, would detract from the simple way that we used to build.
Right. And I would just add, I guess, for what it's worth, it was confirmed at one time that was the last chance to get gas on the West Coast, correct? Before you went down Old 41 and got to Miami?
I hadn't heard that, but probably
I was just
true.
curious if
Sounds
that
good.
confirmed or unconfirmed. But if it is confirmed, somehow, if we could dive in and confirm that, and if it was 1929 when that was, or whenever it was.
Sure, we can do that.
1957, maybe, I don't even know if it'd be a proclamation, something. I'd like to rally around that and draw that back out into the history a little
Why
bit.
not have an old gasoline pump sitting on the side of the building? You know, that would be something to bring back memories.
You're
Those-
following my train of thought.
Those
right.
kinds of things are
Just
really important.
somehow, because
Yeah, we can
I
do
have
that.
heard that, and I see some nods of the head that it is confirmed.
Oh,
Let's
good.
not forget that, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Let's try to somehow
I'm glad you mentioned that.
draw that back, bring
Sure,
that back.
we can do
Thank
that.
you.
Okay.
So Mayor, I'd just like to say,
Okay.
I've had the pleasure working with Sam on other projects, and he does great work, and this is just another example of it. So I
Thank you
just
very
wanted
much.
to Thank him.
Thank you. Thank you.
Model guy.
Wonderful. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
Thank you,
Sam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, we're going to move on to the financial impact on the city of Bonita Springs with the Bonita Wonder Gardens, Green Sheet 17-09-0333. Hello, Ann.
Hello, good evening. Ann Wright, Finance Director. This presentation addresses the financial impact of the Bonita Wonder Gardens loan on the city of Bonita Springs. Have a series of slides. I'd like to start first with an executive summary that makes 3 points. First, it is anticipated that the city will take ownership of the Everglades Wonder Gardens property and related assets, which are currently owned by the Bonita Wonder Gardens. In lieu of receiving a monetary payment for $3 million, the loan receivable which is due from Bonita Wonder Gardens, the city will use the loan receivable asset to, in essence, pay for this capital expenditure acquisition. The impact of this transaction will be a reduction of the city's total general fund balance of $3 million. So the fund balance will decrease $3 million as a result of this transaction. I'd like to go through the impact on cash and the impact on fund balance in a little further. The impact on cash is the loan was paid in accordance with the payment schedule. So if this payment schedule would have been fulfilled and we would have received payment, over the remaining term of the loan, the city would have collected $3.1 million in cash, and that's $3 million repayment of the loan and $100,000 of interest. After receipt of the scheduled payments for FY17 and 18, the general fund cash would then have increased $3.1 million. As loan payments are received, the general fund loan receivable balance decreases and the general fund cash increases. So we're converting a non-current asset to a current asset if, in fact, the loan payments were made. Since it is expected that the FY 2017 and 2018 scheduled payments will not be received in principal and interest payments, the city will not receive that $3.1 million. So our fund balance from the loan, $3 million out, and then the liquidity on our balance sheet with the cash not coming in. So going further on that impact on the fund balance, if the loan was paid in accordance with the payment schedule. If the loan receivable was repaid in accordance with the payment schedule, the principal payments would not impact the total of general fund balance because, as mentioned before, the repayments are shifting from decreasing the loan receivable and increasing cash. So it's an exchange among asset accounts. When the loan was made to Bonita Wonder Gardens, it was $3.5 million loan. Fund balance of $3.5 million was transferred from unassigned fund balance, which also you've heard me refer to as spendable fund balance. So that's fund balance that's there. It has no restrictions on it. It's up to council as to how that fund balance is used, so it's spendable. So transfer to move $3.5 million from unassigned fund balance was made to put it into a category of fund balance that's called non-spendable. That means we have an asset that's tied up for long term, therefore we can't spend the money because it's not cash. It's not in a form that we can spend. But even with that transfer, the total fund balance still stayed the same. As payments would be received, the fund balance would be reclassified from non-spendable to unassigned fund balance, which was the case when the city did receive the payment in June 2016, the $500,000 payment. So the impact on fund balance, assuming the loan will not be paid in accordance with the payment schedule. By using the loan receivable that we are holding to pay for a capital expenditure, the general fund total fund balance will be reduced by $3 million. Because in essence, that's the transaction that we're looking at, is that instead of collecting on a loan receivable, we in essence are going to have a capital acquisition, which from our budgetary standpoint is a capital expenditure. This is the same impact as would occur if the city received the $3 million from Bonita Wonder Gardens and then turned around and gave them $3 million to acquire the property. So it will end up being an expenditure from a budgetary basis, and again, reducing fund balance by $3 million. A couple other matters that I wanted to take this opportunity to brief council on because they are coming up quickly with our fiscal year, not that far away, or year end, not that far away. These are matters that I did spend time with our external auditors so that we were in agreement and understanding as to how the transaction will appear in our audited financial statements. To begin with, from an accounting standpoint or reporting, we have something called a subsequent events reporting requirement. And that's when there are events that don't actually occur at the end of the fiscal year, but occur after the end of the fiscal year, before the audit is issued, that reflect on basically the transaction that really was in effect, or the financial standing that was in effect as of the balance sheet date, the end of the fiscal year. So these subsequent events provide additional evidence with respect to conditions that existed at the end of the fiscal year to be recognized in that fiscal year. The property acquisition meets this criteria and will be reported as if it occurred as of September 30. And one way to think about this is right now we have a loan receivable on our balance sheet, but we know that that loan is not going to be collected. What's going to happen is that we will actually have the land to pay us for that loan receivable. So that transaction will be reflected as of September 30. It does require a budget amendment because, as I mentioned, it's a capital expenditure. It's an expenditure on our books. And that is something that I plan to present to council September 20th. Another reporting matter relating to this transaction is something called extraordinary items. Extraordinary items are items that occur, transactions that occur, or events that occur that are both unusual in nature and infrequent in occurrence. But the auditors and I have concurred that this does meet that criteria. That will result in this expenditure being labeled in our financial statements as an extraordinary item, so it will be broken out separate on our statement of revenues, expenditures, and fund balance, and there will also be a separate note disclosure, so it will be fully disclosed in our audited financial statements. Another matter, the city will allocate the $3 million acquisition cost to those items that we will acquire as a result of the transaction, and this information is needed for our statement that's similar to a balance sheet. It's called the Statement of Net Assets, included in our audited financial statements. So these will break out the value of that $3 million and associate it with the capital items, the capital assets that we do acquire, and some will be depreciable depreciated because they might be the nature that would be depreciated. Obviously, land is not a depreciable asset. So this is information that we will have after the city does agree and comes to an agreement with the Bonita Wonder Gardens, and that we know that there's plans to work on that agreement. And one last item, trying to be comprehensive here, lease accounting. Depending upon the nature of the agreement that the city does enter into with the Bonita Wonder Gardens, we will consider how that's reported. And just wanted to give you a look to the future is that there is a new accounting standard that comes into effect for us in our fiscal year 2021 that does affect how we report leases. So that's in the future, but that's something that the transaction will be reflecting it one way as we start out, but it will change as we go forward. And I'm sorry I didn't have a lot of pretty pictures for you as Sam did, but finally I do want to mention that these comments are addressing the financial impact of the loan receivable. Any future financial impact to the city upon acquisition of the property is not addressed here and is subject to the nature and terms of the agreement between the city and Bonita Wonder Gardens. So just to mention that as well.
Thank you,
that's all I
Ann.
have. Thank you.
And I think I'll start down here, Fred, and then I'll just kind of get everybody's thoughts here on council. Fred, start with you.
No, I think her report accurately sums up the situation.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I want to thank Ann for doing it. I was one of the ones pushing for this. I think the idea of anchoring it to the actual audited financials, which is what you've done, is a perfect idea. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Steve?
Nice job, Ann. Thank you.
Thanks.
Amy?
I'm satisfied.
Thank you.
And I think you went out of your way to really explain it step by step.
Right.
We really know what the impact is. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
All right. I concur. Ditto. Great work.
it. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ann.
Consent agenda.
Okay, we're going to move on now to the consent agenda. Council, take a look at that, and I'm going to pull out J for discussion on the errata sheet.
Jay, oh, okay. I'm going to do I just for discussion.
Okay.
I'll approve the rest.
Okay, motion to approve the rest.
Second.
Okay, there's a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Slakta.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
And we normally go in order, but I'm going to go out of order here, Amy, if you're all right with that. This was an errata sheet to approve an emergency resolution of the city of Bonita Springs declaring a state of local emergency resulting from Hurricane Irma and providing an effective date. And this is green sheet number 17-09-0352. Interestingly enough, this was something that a week ago, 8 days ago, 9 days ago, I was having citizens approach me about when you're out walking and knee-deep water, and I really had to make an assessment on the ground, walking through, were their lives in danger? I didn't see that. I really didn't, and I was asking a lot of people, so it really was. I was talking to the governor's office. I was speaking to State Senator Kathleen Pasadomo, State Representative Ray Rodriguez, the county commissioners, the South Water Florida Management District, on and on. I was talking to everybody, and I just did not see the need at that time, as unfortunate, as uncomfortable as a lot of people were, to declare a state of emergency. But, however, I believe that's changed now. It's apples to oranges. We are getting positive news that it's moving east. However, let's face it, these spaghetti models change every couple of hours, and I just feel strongly that we need to declare a local state of emergency. Obviously, Governor Scott did several days ago for the state of Florida. The city of Fort Myers did last night. I think Sanibel has. It just depends when the meetings are coming up. And here is our meeting. Here is our time. And I would like to make a motion that we do declare a local state of emergency. And we'll have Audrey walk through the legalities and the logistics of that. But I just, I could not be more firm or more adamant that we need to do this. Audrey.
Thank you, and I do want to get some things on the record, and I appreciate that you pulled it from the consent agenda. You have a several packet information here. The first thing is the emergency resolution for the city of Bonita Springs to declare a state of local emergency. I'll go into the powers, but there were some things in this that do relate to the flood event. I want to make very clear that the flooding that the city experienced, very significant localized flooding, as you listened today from Salvation Army, Red Cross, and Bonita Assistance, as well as from Chris Campbell explaining it. It culminated in private and public property damaged, and we have incorporated those events into this declaration of emergency for purposes of making sure FEMA is aware of it, so when we seek relief, that can be addressed. This flooding event was one of the worst as far as 1995. The U.S. Geological Service reported that we actually exceeded the cubic feet per second 45 years as far as an increase. So that is pretty significant. I want to just look at Arlene, make sure I got the words correct. Okay, now I'm going to go into the actual, this is this particular city council's first time doing a declaration for state of local emergency. This power emanates through this, what we call the Stafford Act, which is a federal law, and the state has its own laws. It's all contained in the first part of Chapter 252 of Florida statutes. Specifically, municipalities count as a political subdivision because they're legally organized as such, although there are some differences between counties and municipalities. And we can declare our own state of local emergency in conjunction with what Governor Scott as well as Lee County has done. And there are pros and cons, or pros and benefits in doing so, because we can handle our own assessments, we can make applications to FEMA. The county may be, during an emergency, as well as the state of Florida, looking at such a larger area, and we would look at it localized and be able to address assessments much quicker and earlier. The downfall of doing a state of local emergency is the timing is not the same as what Governor Scott has per the Stafford Act. Instead, it's a 7-day resolution that you can renew and extend every 7 days. Now, to help alleviate that, there's another section, it's actually not in the Stafford Act, it's another state statute area, in which we adopted Bonita Springs Code Section 14-40 through 42, which is also included in your package, which does allow that if we need to do an extension, that resolution can be adopted or approved by either the mayor, the deputy mayor, or if they are not available, by any city council member, so that we have the ability to act in the event we're not able to get a quorum. So this is one of those very rare opportunities. Usually you would hear me say, yeah, I need a quorum. This is one of the few opportunities where I say, no, I'm not going to get a quorum. I mean, I can get a quorum if you want to have emergency meetings, but sometimes you might not be available. And you can see where we did want to try to extend this later, because by having it later, it may allow us to go through. What you don't want to do is adopt something like this on Monday and have the storm make landfall on Monday, so that it makes it easier. So with that, I would request that you approve the emergency resolution that is set forth before you today.
Yes, and I've made that motion, and I just want, and there's been a motion and a second, and I guess, thank you, Fred, for further discussion. We've received some good news over the last 24 hours. However, I want to be very clear, I don't want our citizens to get lulled into any false sense of security. These storms change. Evacuate if you can, and let us know what you need if you can evacuate. And we've made the motion, and for further discussion, Audrey, and I think this will not be would now be an appropriate time to discuss and break through a mandatory versus a non-mandatory evacuation.
So as far as mandatory and non-mandatory evacuations, do you want me to talk about that?
Please, yes, please.
Okay, as I understand it, that's something more in the province of the county. We would normally not do evacuations in your emergency powers. Now, if there's a localized area in which it's needed, I have to check your powers here. we could certainly do so, because that would fall under performance of public work and taking whatever action is necessary to ensure health, safety, and welfare. But normally, Lee County Emergency Operations Center and the Public Safety Department takes it very seriously as far as doing mandatory evacuations. You are telling somebody that they have to leave their home. They do things to try to make sure people leave their home, but some people do not want to leave their home for whatever reason they have during the state of an emergency.
Right. So this would enable us as a city, myself as the mayor, or however you want to phrase that, that if we saw a need with this storm to really localize it, let's just say Quinn Street, for example, fast forward, unfortunately, hopefully we would never need to do this, but we could localize it within the city of Bonita Springs to a certain neighborhood to make a mandatory evacuation, correct?
You could, but you need to make sure there are shelters and available space, and I would coordinate very closely with the 211 social agencies.
Right, which brings up exactly the next thing I was going to bring is shelters. Yes, Carl?
Okay, so what normally happens is, and I've already indicated that Chris Campbell will be up in the county EOC. And as Audrey indicated very accurately, is that the county takes mandatory evacuation orders very seriously. My experience has been it is last resort, okay, to even consider it. But typically what happens is the county will start talking, the EOC folks will start talking to our representative there, who would be Chris. Chris would be calling down the chain of command through the fire department to us to communicate with me, as also certainly with you, as to whether or not that mandatory evacuation order should be issued. My experience has been, if the city's in favor and the county thinks it needs to happen, that order will be issued. So, I mean, and it goes down to the neighborhoods.
Right.
Even at that level, at the county level, you know, there's been times when I've been up there and they're talking about evacuating just a certain number of blocks because they're more at risk than any other blocks in the entire city, whatever city it is.
Right.
So again, it's done in coordination with the county, is what we've experienced before.
Great, thank you.
And I
Audrey?
just want to add, even though the resolution talks about the state statute talks about it too, acquisition and distribution with or without compensation of supplies, materials, and facilities, other statutes within the Stafford Act would require compensation. So if you start commandeering property for use of others, there are some true-up and reconciliation afterwards. Now, FEMA would provide assistance if necessary, but you want to make sure as well as insurance, if that's the case, but you want to make sure you're very careful in what you do, because you will pay first, and then secondary will be obtaining reimbursement if possible.
Great.
And also, Mr. Mayor, if I might, the experience has been that if we can convince people, and especially with the experience of some of our unfortunate folks in the last week, to voluntarily evacuate, that's always better.
Right.
It's always better.
Absolutely.
Because they own the decision themselves.
Right, right. Now, and thank you, and is there further discussion, council? And I may step out at 7:15. We were on a conference call with the mayors statewide last night with Governor Scott. There is another call at 7:15, so I may step out depending on where we are with the meeting. But is there further discussion, council? There's been a motion and a second.
Sounds good.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilman Slakta.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Okay.
Can I just ask a related question?
Yes, Peter,
Yeah, which
please.
is, I appreciate Audrey and Arlene putting in the information about the flood to give us a leg up, hopefully, with respect to helping those people. Are we putting in place whatever we can put in place to hopefully have people be able to access federal government money for the flood that occurred?
Take a look at Arlene, the expert.
We're currently meeting with our CRS coordinator
Right.
and getting information together of what we need. Number one, to protect our rating of CRS for our flood insurance rates and making sure we're properly recording any property damage and public property damage. And secondly, then we're creating documentation for future grant opportunities. One of the important factors that came up today was making sure that this resolution linked the unfortunate flooding situation that we had within the resolution, and that it could only unfortunately, if a hurricane situation happens, with the existing saturated lands, it could contribute to that as well. So we needed to provide a link. Once we receive the reports from the EOC on the actual damages to the property, we'll be working with our CRS coordinator to identify if any of those are repetitive loss properties,
Right.
so that we can be coordinating with them and making sure that they're in the proper channels through the state process, which then trickles to FEMA. We'll also be looking at other opportunities that need to be updated in the county's local mitigation strategy, which might identify capital improvement projects that can help with drainage. If we can identify that there's been repetitive drainage issues, we're going to try to work through those processes. Those, of course, are very long-term funding processes. It is quite a bit of detail, and there's no quick fix to those or quick monies, but we're investigating the process as quickly as we can, and we'll be coming back with more information as we move forward. But right now, we're in a number one, we're trying to make sure all the T's are crossed and all that we're providing all the documentation that we need so we can build that for future opportunities.
Right. And I's are dotted. Very good.
Yes.
I mean, in '95, we had a whole bridge rebuilt by FEMA. So, you know, let's hope.
We would be looking at examples and probably doing historical research on the repetitive situation of
Right.
95, 2008, and currently, and all of those help build the case towards the opportunities for grant funding.
Thank you so much.
Right, right. And I do know that FEMA is here. Now, when I say here, I know they were in Tallahassee as of last night. I don't know if they'll stay there until after the storm and then disseminate from there, but I do know FEMA is here. I know that the governor has spoken with the president, and the governor could not be more pleased with the response from Washington. I saw the press conference today with Senator Rubio and Senator Nelson with the governor. They were on the East Coast, and apparently the federal government's ready to go as well, so that's nice. The federal government is here to help, from what I'm understanding, so that would be a godsend. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
I think
We're good, we don't need to vote on anything else? Okay. So I'm going to interject here, if it's okay, Carl. 4 local emergency shelters here within the city, and we will obviously monitor this with Lee County. And this past week, I know the Estero Rec Center was the location, but if we get, walk us down this path if Estero just isn't realistic for some folks to get to.
Again, this is a county decision. As a emergency shelter, really the YMCA is there as a matter, theirs as a matter of speaking. Because they've got agreements with trained volunteers who can actually staff a shelter. So the county decides whether or not Bonita Springs YMCA needs to be opened or not, in the context of the rest of the county, typically. The challenge with the YMCA, as we've presented to previous councils, is that the building is at proper level for a shelter. The land around it is not. So you may have difficulty getting to it or getting out of it, depending on the situation around the building. So there are challenges there. That's probably why the YMCA is probably low on the list of getting opened. And that's what we know right now.
Do we have alternatives? City Hall, perhaps? I mean, I just feel, obviously want to work in coordination, obviously, with Lee County, but I just feel now's our time to discuss this, to identify, help Lee County identify a spot. And maybe it's right here at City Hall. I mean, I think it's a pretty solid place, but I'm not the one to give it that assessment.
Well, again, so I think there's criteria that a particular structure needs to meet. I don't personally know what that criteria is right now, and I don't know if City Hall would meet that criteria. The other thing is you have to staff it. If you're not going to get support from the county to staff it with trained volunteers, then you are probably looking at a liability situation if you're trying to staff it with anybody other than that. So I would just urge caution in the consideration of that.
Well, and perhaps it's the fire station out on the east end of town. I don't know, but I'm just trying to have this discussion, provoke a little thought, so if and when, hopefully we'll never need to worry about this decision, but that people can stay local in Bonita Springs and get high and dry and safe.
Well, we're happy to, I mean, we've researched this before without actually much success. And we really got hung up even opening the YMCA ourselves, opening it up and having trained volunteers. Because typically the volunteers are turned on by the county. They're the ones that are assigned by the county. We're happy to research it again. The challenge with the fire department out on the east end, for example, Fire Station 4, that's where their emergency operations center is during an event. So they may not have the room or the ability to do that. But again, I hate to sound negative, it's just that there's challenges, and why there's probably only one authorized shelter in the city is there's challenges throughout the city structure-wise.
Fred?
Well, I was going to say, on the fire district, Station 1, which is on 041, I know it has some excess living area in it right now, and most of the other stations do have excess.
Pretty centrally located.
Well, they're all centrally located, and I think most all of them have got a generator, which is another requirement. And so it could, I think it's at least worthy of maybe staff talking to the chief or Greg or whatever. You could only limit, you probably couldn't accommodate across all of them much more than a couple dozen people, maybe a couple dozen family if they kind of squeeze up a little bit.
No, and I apologize for pressing so hard on this, but folks, I'll just be realistic with you. We were moving people out of their homes in canoes and boats this week, and I would like to avoid that at all costs. Don't want to tell somebody in a canoe or a boat that they have to get up to Estero, because it seems like a long way to go.
Or further up than that.
Or further up than that if that's full, right?
Or
So, yeah, no, Pete, please, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, most people, the history of the Y was built with money to be a shelter, and there's been iterations of this, and, one of the iterations was Lee County said when they got the new storm surge maps, let's leave names out of it, their partner wouldn't staff it, and we're left without a shelter. Now, that might have changed since. It sounds like it's technically a shelter under certain circumstances, again. But you're raising this issue. I think it's a darn good issue to raise. Whether it can be solved in 3 days, of course, is a different issue. But I mean, I do think at a minimum going forward, we should be really plowing into this, because here we are in Bonita, and somebody said something tonight, there's a possibility that, I thought I heard a question about Estero. I'm not sure I heard it right, but it's a darn good point.
Arlene, what about St. Leo's Church? Do they qualify as a shelter?
Well, I want to clarify the comments that were made about the Estero Recreation Center. It is not classified to, as I understand, to withstand the storm. What it is a shelter after the storm.
All right, so that's what,
there's two
so
there's
there's
two
another.
types of shelters we're talking about. One is in order to have to be evacuated to a shelter, it has to meet proper building codes and be able to withstand hurricane force winds. So that's a certification that's number one required, because we don't want to relocate evacuees to an unsafe structure, a structure that can't handle tropical storm or hurricane winds. So secondly, then there's a recovery phase where there is opportunities, as long as things can be staffed, to provide folks an opportunity to have shelter. But that's once the storm's cleared, and there obviously there could be conditions where their home's not habitable, and we need to find temporary locations for them. And that's those folks that have been located in the Estero Rec Center. What was being said is, during the actual storm, they will either have to decide to go home, or they will have to be relocated to an approved shelter that it can withstand hurricane, tropical storm force winds. That's why they were going to have to relocate them, because it is not safe to keep evacuees in a location that's not properly storm ready.
So St. Leo's doesn't meet that qualifications?
I'm not aware that they are. What happened in 2008 was that the parish themselves decided to take the opportunity to help parishioners. It was a distribution center there, and there was temporary shelter type activities provided in the community hall, community center there, on their own with Catholic Charities. which was separate than the actual EOC. It was a project they took on their own. I'm not aware that they're rated for hurricane force winds. That would be something we would have to work through.
And Peter, I think the longer-term planning issue is, we're 5 feet from Collier County, a lot closer than South Fort Myers, and that's something to think about too. As somebody here has said, you know, Mother Nature doesn't know those geographic lines, and why we can't be talking to them, I don't know.
Right.
There's,
And I was just going to say, and one member of our city council, formerly two, I guess, live south of the North Naples Fire Department, given our geography. So it's very interesting geography. Fred, Amy, do you have?
No, I was
Hang
just
on,
saying
Fred.
that we have to wait a long time, but I think conceivably the new high school will be a shelter. That's, we have to just get through the season and then. Yeah, and we have to get through the season and this process that we're in there, but, it's a short-term problem, and I think that outreach to private agencies is probably the best short-term solution that we have at this point. So if we could ask our agencies to just canvas areas, so if we really need people, we at least could tell people where they could go, because that's what they want to know.
Yeah.
Right. Fred?
that
and
information's
then-
available.
Yeah.
Well, there are two things. The high school there's two kind of shelters. There's the one that you're supposed to go to during the storm. And there's another one will provide you a place to stay until your place is repaired or you buy a new house or whatever. I was told today by somebody that I think should have some knowledge on our representative of the school board, and she was indicating that they've been having discussions with the county, and one of the places that would likely be opened, I don't know if this is true, but possibility of the Germain would be opened up.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's for an after the storm or during the storm. Actually, the way it was presented to me, it sounded like it was during the storm as a shelter.
Right. So I don't know where we go from here, but we've had a good discussion on this, and Carl, I know, and Arlene, I know you'll follow up, but I feel strongly, repeating myself, but I feel strongly we need to have something just in case here, and I don't know how we get to the just in case.
And just to clarify, anyone who's looking for a shelter now, they can go on the EOC's website. Those are clearly identified. We just want to make sure everyone's fully informed and keeps up with the EOC's updates as well. So those are properly listed on there, the current ones that will be active during this event.
And where would those be locally for folks that may not be able to get on the website or aren't tech savvy like me, or where would those be? Where are those locations? Laura, would you like to come up? That'd be great. Hello.
Laura Taylor, Director of Communications. So currently what we know, we've been working with the EOC. As of now, they do not have shelters activated. They expect to have activation tomorrow. At that time, residents can call 211 to get shelter activation information and all resource information that they may need. They will also push it out on apps and Facebook, and it'll be shared with our local media at that time. We'll have that information. We'll be able to share it with any callers. We've been also passing out information to low-lying areas, encouraging them to dial 211, call the EOC, get the app. Right now, what they're telling us is that they have to wait until the cone is closer. So they are fully activated at the EOC, and they are monitoring it. But they cannot put the shelters into place yet. We should know by tomorrow something as far as shelters go. They are looking at special needs right now, and it basically says the special needs registration closes once Lee County enters the 5-day error cone. Residents who are currently registered can go on general population shelter if they are open. Once there, these residents will be triaged, and if needed, transportation to other facilities that can better meet their needs will happen. So as soon as they get to that point, that information will be available.
Great, thank you, Laura. And I forget who suggested this, but as that information moves forward on Bonita TV, perhaps, I don't know, myself or Carl or whomever, somebody, we shoot just a 30-second or a 2-minute video, whatever it is, and get that so it's on Bonita TV as another way to get information out?
We have some scrolling going on now, but I will tell you that depending on how serious the event looks like it's actually going to be, we may suspend regular programming and just have storm information
Right.
on there.
Right.
Just
right,
until
Right.
it
Public
passes.
service notices, let me know, because I think we need to go outside of the box. Thanks. Yeah, Laura?
I was just, in reference to Bonita Television, we have since Sunday been monitoring with EOC and sharing information. Right now it is scrolling. We wanted to make sure that the council meeting went live. As soon as that is finished, the programming, as Carl said, will be suspended and the bulletin board will be live and it will just share emergency messaging from the Emergency Operations Center. We're also working closely with the Sheriff's Office and the Fire Department to share local information. We have incorporated the chamber as well as Bonita Springs Utilities on that chain so that any local information that needs to be shared is communicated appropriately through the agencies. And we're working to share that. Right now, it will be on our city Facebook page and on our city website.
Right.
All other information will be supportive of the EOC and trying to get our residents to be paying attention to local media as well as our Emergency Operations Center, because we do not want to have information that's being updated consistently that we're not getting or we don't have correctly. So the most important part of crisis communication is making sure that we have Emergency Operations Center information messaging and that people have the resources to get to it.
Right. Thank you. Council?
Yeah, Mayor, I really like what you said about the public service announcements, because I'll tell you, there are a lot of people, even in my community, they didn't even know what 211 until they read it in the banner, okay? And so they asked me, what 211? And I said, well, emergency, you got, just call that number. So, and a lot of people don't have our channel 98, they don't have cable, they don't, I just think public service announcements are a big, big help, because most of them are watching the Food Service Network,
Right. Or they'll be watching the Patriots on Thursday night and kick off the NFL
Here
season,
we go.
whatever it may
Here we
be.
go.
But all right. But whatever we need to do, and thank you so much, team, for what we're doing. And I know we'll all dig deeper and get through this. Amy, you had
Yes,
pulled the other
yeah. Did you
item.
forget me?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I just would like Matt to come up here. I'm very obviously in favor of this, but I think Spring Creek is, continually asking us what the heck is going on. So could you just tell them how this fits in with the calendar and what exactly we're voting on today?
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Matt Feeney, Public Works Director, for the record. This is the engineering required to certify the project complete once we actually go to construction. But there is a little bit of legwork out ahead of that, which is oyster relocation. So these are the services that will be required of the engineer to certify the project when it's completed, but also to make sure that the mitigation, which is an offset that was required from our federal and state permits, really from our state permit, that we do oyster relocation. So we have to build some oyster bars out in the bay, and we have to coordinate with the Department of Environmental Protection and then have those folks actually relocate them. So this encompasses both of those services under the
So
supplemental
they're
task
not going to see any
authorization.
dredging right now, right?
No, but
That's
this
what
is
they're asking.
This is required work that has to happen as
Preliminary
a contingent on those
Okay.
permits.
Do we have an estimated time for when we might
We'll
start?
put this thing out to bid.
It has to be still put
and
out
its
to bid.
estimated construction time frame, once we award a construction contract, is about 60 days. So we don't have it out on the street yet for bidding, but it would be probably as soon as October 1st that we would be looking at putting that out on the street for solicitations.
Like November, December, or something like that? Okay. No, they asked me a date, and I don't know. That's good. Is that a fair estimate?
Those are fair estimates, but they're always dependent on contractor scheduling, once we get them
All
on
right,
board.
thank you. I appreciate it.
You move to
I move to approve.
Second. Motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman
Aye.
Salza.
Okay, we're going to move on to mayor and council member items. Item A, city council discussion regarding the Big Carlos Pass Bridge project. And this is Councilwoman Amy Carumba.
I just put this on the agenda to have a discussion with council, because I've been getting a number of emails from people in the immediately affected area, though it really will affect the whole community. And I'd like to have some guidance in regard to whether we should, what kind of monitoring we might be doing in regard to this process. I know that the Lee County is in the PD&E study phase, but there seems to be some conflicting information, or not up-to-date information, that I've been getting from some of the residents. And there was an interest in coordinating whatever the city of Bonita Springs does with the Fort Myers Beach governing body also. And I know that there is a provision within the calendar to have public input, which maybe is going to occur in November, but the last calendar I saw had slipped. But I personally had never been notified of this. I got it from a secondary information. So I think that we might be missing some things here. So what I think I would suggest is that we have a discussion among ourselves, that we are certain that whatever comes out of that replacement study and proposal, that it is compatible with the community vision of human scale, sensitive to the nature of the whole beach area. And we just got a letter in another matter in regard to what the Bonita Beach Improvement Association thinks about how that whole area should look like, and incorporate it with our view about having multimodal provisions down in there. We have a lot of plans along that river, and along the beach. So I think whatever is done to the bridge is going to be important to our whole aesthetic there. So I assume that the rest of you are on board, but I'm not 100% sure that you're on board. And so I would just like to get some voice confirmation that these kinds of aesthetic concepts are something that we would support, A, and two, that we could discuss how we could monitor this in a way that would be a little more, will be a little better, so that we don't get these outside influences that are saying, we heard this, we heard this, we heard that.
Steve?
I'm supportive of it, Amy.
Pete?
No, absolutely supportive, and to be more proactive as opposed to just waiting to see.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, I had proposed that we ask for, there's a series of studies that are going to be coming out of this larger study, like 6 or 7 different focuses, that as they are developed, we could ask to see them, just so we can look at them to see which direction they're going to. But, you know, I think it's something we should decide as a group, and not that I shouldn't do that just on my own.
Go.
Fred? Oh, so, Pete, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Go ahead,
Fred?
Oh, there's at least 2 people that have assured me at the highest level. One is in state government, and first of all, the state is basically doing, kind of driving the study more than, that they will be listening intently to whatever comes out of the local workshops, input, public hearings, however you want to call it, and that they're prepared to even consider other possibilities, solutions, but not much more than that. They are very intent on listening to the people. And I also understand that right around the time of these public comments, each of the cities of Lee County, in particular, Bonita, Fort Myers Beach, probably, I would think Estero, because part of their residents can see that bridge as well, depending on where they live, especially if they live down in the colony. And I know at least one does anyway.
Right.
We
So
can't
that,
see it.
so that's the assurance I have. I think that I support what Amy's saying, but I think we need to see what happens. But I think we need to get from them, as soon as they have it, where all these public meetings will be held, so we can make sure that our people know for sure, and we can obviously participate in as well.
Bless you. Okay.
This bridge is within Bonita Springs?
Excuse me?
This bridge is within Bonita Springs?
Half of it.
Yes, half of it.
But
Half of it.
links to Star
Yeah,
Boulevard?
yeah, half of
Who
it.
your assurance is from, FDOT, or who is it?
Yeah, FDOT.
Well, I mean, it's helpful to know
Yeah.
who's
Well,
saying.
I appreciate that FDOT had articulated that to you, but I do think that Lee County is driving the bus from at least the study point of view. And I don't think there's anything wrong with our doing some preliminary ratification of the direction or just the concept of where we want to go with this, you know?
It does kind of have echoes of a former PD&E study.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've been assured that it wouldn't, but
Well, and I did ask, and I got, got hold of the RFP for the study itself, and if you look at the scope of services, it's pretty much what was said at a presentation that was made to us.
Right.
And I had Jim Worcester from our zoning board look at it, just because I'm not used to looking at RFPs. And he came back with a lot of interesting comments about what he thought might be a good alternative to some of the alternatives that were brought up there. Now, it's probably too late to go in that direction because the RFP has already been given, but it just illustrated to me that I think I would rather be a little more proactive, but still sensitive to the fact that the Lee County Board of County Commissioners are gonna make the decision. It's clear, because they have the authority to do it. And just in a friendly way to be a little more proactive. I just have a feeling that that's the direction I would want to go, but that's why I'm talking here.
yeah, I would.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you,
I would add
Amy.
one other bit of information. Roughly speaking, the bridge is going to cost in the neighborhood of 70 million bucks. And if the study comes out in such a way that it's kind of like one of the recommended solutions, then DOT would more than likely pony up at least $20 million or so. I don't know that FDOT's going to put any money in it. They may just be a pass-through. And so it'll be important, what it'll come down to is whatever is recommended. If they don't go that way, then their choice is not to do anything to the bridge, or they get to pay the other $20 million.
And this will go through the Lee County,
MPO?
Thank you, yes, of course, right?
Yeah.
And we'll have a consistent message
Yeah, and you
coming
got two-
back to the, right?
And you
Okay.
got 2 votes on it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
2 votes that might go with the majority of council?
But I'm sorry, what role does the MPO have there? They review the study?
They will, I know they presented us a presentation on that study when it just barely got underway.
And then what do you do with that? Okay, they presented, now what do you do? That's the question. What role does the MPO have? They have a vote?
They will, I think the only way MPO will have a vote on it is if it becomes so contentious that a number of cities are asking them to not do it or something like that, kind of like another.
Flyover?
We were all involved. Yeah.
I thought,
Yes, Audrey?
wasn't the MPOs are created under state and federal law for all planning projects, so once there's a certain level, and I believe this is in the PD&E study
Right.
right now, so they will, once the PD&E is complete, it will then be looked at by the MPO, who will do a vote, and I'm sure the MPO representatives here will make sure.
Yeah, but it is, I mean, I agree with Amy. But I think Fred's assurances are great. They're not your assurances, they're things that are being said to you by certain people.
Mm-hmm.
How comfortable are you?
Well, the one that said it to me, you know very well, you'll see him
Right,
shortly.
all right.
Do we need to vote on this?
Well, no, the question
No.
is what we're voting on. So what do you, I mean.
Just an agreement that we want to have the ultimate decision that's made be compatible with our community vision of human scale development, and recognizing the characteristic that's been supported by the Bonita Beach Improvement Association for 30 years,
Right.
And also compatible with our multimodal interest that's already been defined along that corridor, you
Right.
know.
So
And-
they will say that fits into the PD&E study, because, you know, the environmental part of PD&E includes what we might want to call aesthetics or other
Right.
important things like that.
And I just would like to put in my, if I were making a decision, that would be a more highly weighted criterion. And just on biking alone, you
Right.
know, you just can't go up 65 feet on a bridge and do it
Right.
comfortably, you know, unless you're 40 years old.
Well, I'm sure, I mean, Peter's on the MPO, I am, Fred is, and the alternate, Fred also
Right.
often participates. We'll clearly convey that at the appropriate way.
Yeah.
And is there any monitoring? I mean, how should?
Well, we should look into that.
Yeah, I think could we ask staff to try to be a little more proactive on the monitoring?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
And I am troubled
Like who's
with-
doing what to who,
Yeah,
when.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think that would, because I don't want to get
All right.
information from outside of our own people.
Okay. Do we have a consensus on that?
Sir.
Thank you.
All right, good. Fred, you're next, I
Oh.
believe, on this agenda.
Yeah, and actually, I had two things that all I was looking for was a consensus of council to let staff look into two things. One is explore different possibilities of creating sources of revenue to fund better stormwater management in the city, especially in some of the problem areas. And by definition, if you do better stormwater management, most of the time that improves water quality because you slow down a whole lot of muddy water loaded with pollutants running right into the river. Some of the possibilities, and I'm sure that the staff may come up with others, one of them would be you could, when we get that impact study done, you could ask for a stormwater management impact fee on any new construction. That's a possibility. Another possibility that Audrey is much more familiar with it than I am, I think Councilman O'Flynn is too, and that is creating, what'd you call it, stormwater utility districts where
Or
it's assessments and
Right.
and she can explain about how the assessments are done. It's a lot more sophisticated. I guess what happens is those that get the most benefit tend to pay more than those that don't, but Audrey may. But I think all they want to do is look at these different things, come back to us with recommendations. Likewise, we can make some real improvements to our design criteria requirements for stormwater management. And there was one, I called it a token, that was tried to increase things by 10%, which was about an eighth of an inch. I think a possibility exists that you may want to consider doing something like this. That we have a number of areas of the city that in wet seasons of the year have a lot of water standing on them. They're not all east of I-75. Some may be close to the coast, more up Amy's way. Some are still showing water on them along Bonita Beach Road on the north side between, let's say, Livingston and 75. And the water's pretty deep. You may want to treat the design criteria for those kind of lands that are holding more water now than all we require for new construction to hold, 1.5 inches. So anyway, those are some of the things they would look at, and they would come back with recommendations for us to consider, so.
I wonder if we could have Matt come up. Matt? Any reflections on this?
Excuse me. Matt Feeney, Public Works Director. I think that, you know, we've looked at possibilities, done some just very investigatory in nature. about stormwater utilities through the Florida Stormwater Association, which we're a member. They have some very good resources that talk about different methodologies. It is clear along those lines that to establish a funding mechanism like that, there is a kind of a detailed rate analysis approach that would come forward. So I think there would be some value in looking at that. We do have a lot of stormwater needs in terms of volumetrics, which was demonstrated obviously with this storm, but also with the standing water quality regulations that we have, which affect the entire Imperial River and ultimately Estero Bay. So to get the water cleaned up and to deal with the volumetrics, it can be a very challenging issue if you don't have a funding stream for it. So,
Fred, I think you've touched on this, which is it's the flood component as well. It's not just the design of individual.
Yeah, it's actually the flooding is what kicked this off.
Right.
But it's
right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's a fabulous idea. Myself, council.
Well, I am very receptive to a lot of things that are in this green sheet, but I wonder if we're jumping ahead to the financing part of this before having a clear picture of what the problem is,
Right.
Because I do think it's localized in many instances, and it's very complicated within the city because we have all these gated communities with their own community development districts that
Right.
are operating, and in fact, I have a report that I will share with people from my own community because our residents were asking lots of questions because we had a number of issues during the rain. And I would like to have some reporting system given from either Matt or whoever would do this, how we have a citywide stormwater management system, how these things are all connected, because I think they are connected. They influence one over the other. And it's not the same problem for each area. So I don't even see how we could approach a financing mechanism unless we really understand what the problem is we're trying to address. So that's
Well, what about looking? Oh, sorry.
that's what I would like to direct to the staff, is to just give us a better picture of what we're dealing with.
All right.
And I know that one of the problems that happened within Pelican Landing is that we have a series of ponds, and one is supposed to go to the other, to the other, to the other. And they all are authorized through the Southwest Florida Water Management. And evidently, in their permitting system, and they have sluice gates and all these other things, this is a technical thing, but I thought it was really interesting. They're not allowed by their permitting system to move the water from one pond to another
Right.
unless there is a certain level that's determined by the Southwest Florida Water Management System, unless they, in writing, ask for it, and then they have to get an answer. So during these few days where we had the trouble, they couldn't do it because they didn't go to an alert level in that system. So this was a problem within our community, and if we went to a better system, I know what we're doing in Pelican Landing is we're going to go to the Southwest Florida Water Management and say, allow us to use our own decision when we want to move from the upper level ponds down to the lower. So I don't know if other communities are having the same thing. We, in Pelican Landing, again, we have inflow from the eastern part, so something's going outside of our community that's creating a problem that never was there. Those are the kinds of things that I think we need to address. The stuff, that's out in the eastern portion where you said that's north of Bonita Beach Road, which we saw in the videos, which the water is still there standing around. How is that happening, and what is that doing? That would require something else.
Right.
So I do think we need to analyze it a little bit more, and maybe after we get an idea of what the extent of the problem is and the causes, and I think there'll be more than one cause, that we'll be able to say we have to finance it in a certain way.
Well, I think. Sure.
Because certain things we can do with new development, and there are other things, they're not going to develop there, or they're not going to develop for 20 years. We still have to, solve the problem. So that's.
Yeah, Fred, could you explain to me about who would the taxing or the assessment, how would the taxpayers feel about it?
First of all, this is not a decision to do that tonight.
No, I understand
What it is, it's to allow Audrey and other appropriate people on staff to develop ideas and concepts that come back, number one. Number two, on design criteria, we still have new construction going on. And all I can say is if you don't get this stuff changed, it's only gonna get worse. And it's that simple. And then one of the things that can be done if we end up having revenue streams, you can go back into existing developments with a concurrence permission on their part to upgrade their systems to make it better. And if it makes it better, that keeps more water out of the river and all that. None of this is in concrete tonight. It would be a long time before.
Fred, I understand that.
Yeah.
I perfectly understand that. All I wanted to know is, I feel a little bit like Amy. I don't feel like I have enough information yet, and that's why I would like to wait and see what the staff.
But how,
Well, I think that's what he's suggesting,
how
get the
can you get the
information.
information if you don't
Get it.
let staff get it?
Right.
Work on it. That's
Yes,
all I'm
well,
asking.
That's all I agree with you.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I'm in favor of the policy aspects of it, and I think it's premature to go into the funding aspects.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Well, there's two parts to this. One is the criteria, and the other is the funding. And the only reason for the funding, if we want to develop funding, if we wait till we have everything figured out and then we try and do this, you're just farther behind on having something figured out you could implement. But
There is a chicken and egg element to it.
yeah,
Yep.
And I think it's part of the same package. I will say this, that there are two baskets, and there are probably more, but to me, two fundamental baskets of issues here. One is, all right, Pelican Landing, CDD, what do they have? Bonita Bay, what do they have, et cetera, all right. There are issues all over town, and there's a lot of good stuff that's been getting done, but the other one is the flood risk for a river. And we are relatively unique in that here. And I think what you hear out there, not from what you're saying, but people will say, well, we'll engineer, and they're talking as though they're engineering the river like they're engineering Hunter's Ridge, which is a different thing. And just a few other observations. I sat there for a year, and Fred was up here on the Water Task Force with one particular guy saying flood risk is just a scare tactic in Bonita Springs. All right. And there were other comments made, and I won't say by who, but, well, the city has an improved FEMA rating, therefore we don't have a flood risk. And we all gritted our teeth through that, you know. So, but so it all comes back to that part. It comes back to the east part of town and how for 16 years, many people, including I see Martha back there, people on council, who have thankfully worked hard to preserve the opportunity there for mitigation, for additional mitigation. But frankly, what's happened is those people have preserved that opportunity. We haven't had the funding to move forward with respect to that opportunity. And there's been a lot of work done on this. You know, Bonita 95 flood is not just the name of a flood, it's the name of a whole study that was done, Bonita 1995. There was a South Lee County watershed plan. All of it made totally clear that this is a unique risk to Bonita Springs. So when I hear Fred talking about what he's talking about, it's music to my ears, and I'm saying, I agree with Fred. Fred's not saying we're going to rush to fund this thing, but there's a lot that needs to be done, all right? The notion that flooding was a scare tactic was bogus, all right? So we kind of know what the problems are, and we kind of know what elements of the solutions are, and we need a new focus on this, and I think that's what he's suggesting. Yeah. Part of it may involve funding. You might as well look at the funding at the same time. And the particular funding he's talking about is in place all over Florida. There are hundreds of municipalities, including Naples, all over Florida that have stormwater utilities. And the way to deal with your Vanderbilt Lakes versus the middle of town is there's various, first of all, it's not a large charge to people who have it, but it's a lesser charge for people who have already in place stormwater systems, you know? So I just as soon set Audrey and Matt and whatever Carl thinks loose to look at this, but my view is we gotta hop on this. Hop on studying and figuring it out.
Well, I think we need I mean, it's clear in your mind that the solutions are there. It's not clear in my mind that the solutions are there. So let's have a presentation from staff.
On the solutions?
Yeah, the solutions. No,
Well-
and what the problems are and how we're gonna take it.
We
You're
do
talking
have-
about river flooding. I mean, what is the solution to river flooding?
So we don't have a solution right now tonight, just for the record. But what we do have is we have a comprehensive stormwater management plan that we
That's
can
different.
certainly look at as a part of this. If you're looking at citywide kind of things. But that's not the only thing, but obviously we're getting the message, so.
Well,
They could just go forward.
And on that point, if I might add, even though I think Councilman O'Flynn and I agree that that is a good start, that stormwater master plan, but it's
Right, it's-
not to be in all that.
That-
But one thing I'll say, it's been underfunded every damn year almost.
Right.
So the only way you're gonna get some stuff done is you're gonna have to have funding streams available.
And that water master plan is localized flooding. That's what the entire report from 2011 is. It's localized flooding.
Right.
It's not the big event.
Right.
It's not the flood coming out of the other side of the Kiel Canal. It's not parcels in town that might be looked at. And there's a reason why that wasn't included. And we want to try to change that.
And the other reason there's some need to get design criteria revised, besides this thing east, there's any coastline projects, and there's two that I'm gonna leave unnamed, but one of the ways that they handle the water is they get it off the site into the bay quicker. Now, do you want that? But the developers pay for any criteria design. So we need to get on the horse.
The reason we were singing from the same hymnal here is we worked together for 3 years before we were on council.
Yeah.
5 years on all of this.
Well, in fact, he and I drove almost every week through an area of
Right.
the east part of town, looking at the water levels in 2013. That was when we had that wet season.
Well, can we have a consensus that they go forward and,
Yep.
and look into it?
Have a
And,
presentation.
yeah,
You okay, Carl?
I'm fine, you got it.
yeah.
Okay. Good.
First reading?
I'm done.
Thank you. For
Thank you.
other council member items that are not on this?
Got no.
You said you had two, but they were 2 and 1. You said that you had two.
Oh, well, this was two
Right,
things
okay.
wrapped in one, yeah.
Any other council member items that are not on the list? I had, just to be quick, and we can cover it the next meeting, on the Sun Trail, we kind of have a hat trick here, but it's an interesting little aspect to it, which is the state came back, the office in Tallahassee, with their map, and not only do we have Beach Road and up to Lover's Key as a priority trail, we also have an opportunity trail, which we asked for, which is, well, this is not funded, this is declared, okay? On Imperial up to Three Oaks. All right, then, the interesting thing is, the right-of-way of the railroad is in as an opportunity, not a priority. And I don't want to get into too much, sound like somebody else, but here, but that presents a certain opportunity for us with respect to negotiation. All right, let's leave it at that for now, if I can. But there is a big push on to also have that reinstated as a priority trail. And Lee, the MPO's activated on it, people in Tallahassee have activated on it, and it's a little odd, although it doesn't, that it wasn't priority. It came out of a policy that was talked about in the Office of Greenways and Trails, where they didn't want to have duplicative priority trails, so they added the beach route. The only issue is, there are duplicative priority trails all over the state of Florida, all over the state of Florida. And those arguments are already being made, and so Nick Batos and I are involved with this, and a whole bunch of people who are volunteering are involved with it. There was going to be a meeting next week we would go to, but that's canceled because of the possible hurricane. But I'll keep you informed and maybe send around a note on that.
Imperial to Three Oaks sounds like a winner to me.
Well, yeah, it's all good. I mean, we had nothing, basically, a year and a half ago, so. So that's it on that. The other thing is I am going to meet, weather permitting, with Secretary Nandam next week to talk about, primarily to talk about the quadrant plan. And so that's scheduled for the end of next week, assuming there's no weather issues.
Okay, first readings.
Okay. First reading, is this you, Audrey?
Yes, sir, if I may. This,
Okay.
do we have, okay, thank you. This is an ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs amending Section 2-571, setting forth the community development planning and zoning fees, providing for cost recovery for certain consultants, providing for a repealer, conflicts of law, severability, codification, scrivener's errors, inclusion code, and an effective date. This ordinance is scheduled, if council goes forward, to a second reading and public hearing on September 20th, 2017, with LPA reviewing the ordinance at its September 14th, 2017 meeting. I have the notice of publication from the news press that it was advertised in the August 23rd, 2017 Fort Myers News Press, and it is legally sufficient, and a copy, or the original, is on file with the city clerk. The ordinance does have some changes to it that are pretty much, you've seen them already. John can go through, or Jackie can go through as the changes. The main thing is that there is additional instructions in the ordinance as to addressing the cost recovery deposit. This is the new item, and that's probably your most expensive portion. Now, this is an escrow account, so like a retainer. They have the application, they pay forward, and once we reach certain limits, then additional payment. That will relieve some of the city budget, not obviously to litigation challenges, but for review purposes.
Thank you. Public comment?
Yes, Alex Grant, proud owner of Grant Swamp, and
On this ordinance?
Sounds like an attraction.
on which there are two structures, an industrial building on the top of Mount Bunny and a residential structure on the top of Mount Potty. Anyway, what I'm addressing is the situation with the sheet flow.
Alex, this is public comment just on, I wasn't clear enough perhaps. This is just public comment on what Audrey read.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But then in 2 seconds, we're going to ask you.
Oh,
back.
okay.
All right.
I apologize.
All right. We'll come back for an amount.
Applied if you were going to go in for rezoning.
Any
Sorry,
comment?
I didn't
No,
realize
it's not
this-
your sorry.
Oh,
No
okay.
problems.
Okay.
Yeah. Any public comment on this proposed first reading? All right. Council?
Move to move it forward.
Second. Discussion? Roll call?
Deputy Mayor O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman
Aye.
Sakta.
All right, motion passes. Councilman Grant.
All right, back again on the sheet flow situation. Now, what we have, I know I had been harping on hydric soils on the east part of town. Some are inside the city limits. The majority are outside in this Imperial River watershed, which is about 320 square miles from Lehigh Acres. And this is where the
problem.
One of the problems is we have the water coming out outside of our city limits, in effect, in the county. So that's one of the problems. And then, of course, should we have a hurricane on the west side where we have the Imperial River, then we would have, and heavy rains inside, we would have a meeting of water along the river, right in the middle of town. You don't want to go there,
Don't wanna go there.
I just,
Right.
you're well aware of the
Right.
situation. And basically what I'm trying to get at is we have to use zoning regulations and whatever with caution because of this situation where you have a river running right through the middle of town and a number of creeks, half a dozen or so, coming into that.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
you guys know that.
Thank you, Alex. Everglades, ever-flowing river of grass. We live in the Everglades. Let's get used to that. We're living in a swamp. It's always been that way, and God made it that way, and I guess it comes all the way down from D.C., but we can't drain the swamp because we're living in the Everglades, period. Let's accept that. As far as the stormwater, I guess we MSU and multiple service units for a taxing unit for a certain area of town that is prevalent to flooding all the time. It's either that or buy the property and make it into a resort or swimming pool or something. This came up years ago. Back in '95, the problem was extenuated for so long, and that was because, well, for one reason, the Terry Street Railroad Bridge and the bridge over on Terry Street was clogged up and hadn't been cleaned out, and it was an emergency order by Don Stillwell to clean out underneath that, and in 2 days all the water was gone. So that was a major problem. So I'm really glad that the city has drained, and that was a priority when we became a city to make sure our drainage system was in operation. And I believe the city is drying out. Now this Quinn Street area has traditionally been a problem as far as that. But what came out years ago was that like 65% of the Bonita Springs live in gated communities which have developed their own rainwater systems. And it wasn't fair to tax them for this other part of the city that needed the problem. So I guess it's MSU or whatever they call it, but and then Fred's idea of putting it in on the new development impact fees is a possibility. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. Hey, Martha.
Lychee Cat Swamp, Martha Simons. Whatever. It's wet out there. I want to draw your attention to a pamphlet that's out in the lobby. It's in Spanish. An emergency of refugees, public refugee centers, #1, Bonita Springs YMCA. This was put out by the EEOC for 2017-2018. Really, please, people, get your information right. But also what's informative here is this map, which shows you your surge zones. And if this storm comes over this way, get the heck out of Dodge. Listen to, your local media or, city news or whatever it is you're paying attention to. But pay attention to leave, because we could get a lot of water. And I'm talking about like to your second floor, like right here. Okay, 15 feet, 23 feet out where you live. So you need to have a third floor, Carl. Yeah. Wow. Okay, you only have 2. So you're getting out of Dodge. Mr. Steve, you too, okay? So, very important. I want to thank all of you. Mayor, you were out there in that floodwater in your sandals. Hope you took an amoebic preventative. But you're amazing, and I want to thank each and every one of you for the things that you did to help those people. There were more people that needed help. Citrus Park, I don't think we could get in there, and that's wrong. So if you can declare public emergencies in certain parts of town, I met an elderly person who was stuck for a week at the Legion the other day. She said, "Oh, it's my first night out." I'm like, "That's a week." Can you imagine elderly people, maybe a little not knowing who to call or don't have anybody to call, and a manager of a park is refusing to let officials into it? That's just wrong. I don't care how much we ticked you off, okay? But anyhow, I also don't appreciate them pumping, especially when, it's pretty stinky out there with their little sewage plant. So, okay, there's other places to address in town, Morton Grove, da-da-da-da. And I want to speak to Amy Q. This conversation about a stormwater assessment, Steve might remember, came up in the past. And so what City Council did was we said, well, before you put the, asking for the money, let's get a study. And so we have come up with specific projects, not we, the engineers. What was that? Integra, I think, did that. Integra did the study.
Yep.
What?
Intera.
That's what it is. But they had integrity. So, Intera did the study for both stormwater projects for stormwater quality and stormwater quantity. These are millions of dollars of projects that are going to help the city. Water knows no boundaries like CDDs and public lands. So, everybody's got to buy into this. And I understand you have a CDD, but, you have stuff that we don't have on the outside, So you pay for that, and that's all good. But water knows no lines, like Bonita Beach Road on one side is like Collier County, and the other side. It doesn't know that. It's going. It doesn't know that El Dorado Acres is not in the city of Bonita, but the water is going to come over there, over near the colony. It doesn't know that. It's going to cut you off from the Coconut Road. So I think it's long due that we have a stormwater utility assessment, because we are not going to correct these problems in our city without funding, and nobody's going to do it unless we do it ourselves. I mean, we've seen that. We've been studying this. Basically, the DRGR was created in 1988 for this hydric soil and in the watersheds and everything, and density reduction, groundwater resource. We need to pull together also. Okay, if you look at this slosh map, that's what that's called, the stormwater surge, the place you could really have a hardened hurricane shelter is probably in the purple area. Now that's off Corkscrew near Estero. We need to work with Estero because their rec center isn't going to work for them. We need to, I don't know what we're going to do, but we need to team up with them and maybe the folks out east of that, and maybe the university, to talk to them about getting a real emergency shelter. We have 600,000 plus people living in this county, and we only have 5,000 spaces. Okay, that is wrong. We looked at Houston. What's happened to those people? There's churches opened up. St. Leo's, the Presbyterian Church, they took in flood victims. We didn't care about bureaucracy. We took care of our own Bonita Springs. I understand the liability and all that, but when it comes to somebody's wet and their house is not usable and they need a place to go, the church has opened up and took them in. And I, get it. We're government and, all that stuff. But Houston didn't seem to worry about that. And Houston used to be a sponge with hydric soils. And they dropped their zoning. And they said, let's build. You have too much impervious pavement, you're not going to have any place for the water to go. So thank God, members of council who voted to not build over in the east part of town have given us a reprieve to address those issues, get standards in place, get projects done, get this assessment done. And, we're not going to cure the big thing, but we're going to cure something for some people, and that's worth it. And that's what government does, is work for the people. Thank you. You've been doing that.
Thank you.
And I thank everybody on the city staff, wherever you are, Debbie Philippek, Arlene, Carl, your code, neighborhood services, everybody who were out there in the water and talking on the phone. You really help people, and that's what you're about. So thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Stormwater
Thank
utilities.
you for all your help.
Hey, kid, that's what I do.
I know. You rescued a dog the other day. Thank you.
I washed a dog.
Yes, you did. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, Kathy McGrath. You've had a lot of serious and very important issues to discuss tonight, and I always like to lighten things up a little. I wanted to personally thank Nicole and her whole staff at the Rec Center for the wonderful event they put on, if you weren't aware of it, August 17th. They try to do it every year, and it benefits a charity, and this year it benefited the Breast Cancer Foundation. But it was on August 17th, and lunch was provided, I believe donated by Jersey Mike's, and Anthony's put on their little fashion show, and they had some wonderful raffle baskets and a 50-50. Unfortunately, I didn't win anything, but there were two staff members from City Hall who did, so that's the positive thing. And I am told that they raised about $2,500 for the Breast Cancer Foundation, so that's good. So everybody, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go, watch next August. It'll probably be on the city's website, but it's just a very, very nice thing, and it always benefits a good charity. So I just wanted to thank Nicole. I don't want to name each. I'll forget if I try to name them. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Other members of the public? Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Robert Allen, and I reside in the Morton Grove community, which consists of three associations, one of which I'm the president. I was on the ground for about 3 weeks. I drove up to Corkscrew, down to Bonita Beach Road. I walked from Bonita Grande to Imperial. I tried my best to find where the water was going and how it was being stopped or whether it was flowing freely. The only spot that I found where the water went freely under I-75 was down by Farmer Mike's. Going west from Farmer Mike's, there's a FPL transfer station. They have a very large pipe. It dumps out by Southern Pines Mobile Parks.
Right.
It's not a round pipe, it's a really long, elongated one. I took photographs. Beautiful. Now, if you come to where I live, if you picture yourself being on Bonita Grande, and this is Terry, and there's the drain down Terry, and there's the drain on Pine Lake. On Terry, there are connecting pipes that go underneath from Pine Lake to the ditch on Terry, the residential side. And I followed those down, and some of them actually go to Pine Lake, but a couple of them don't go to Pine Lake. They go over to Terry's side, which goes to where Morton Grove is. I followed also the pipe from, the drainage ditch from Terry up at Bonita Grande all the way down to I-75. It's clogged. In some sections, it's at least 75% impeded. I was out there Friday, not past, but the Friday before we got the big storm on Saturday, and I was out there with a pole and hook, and I was dredging by hand. It helped a little bit, and came Saturday, it was over. FDOT, they're not dredging their canals at all. If you start up by BSU, the treatment center, and you come down 75, and you look at the ditch down there, it's clogged, completely clogged. If you follow the drain past me and Morton Grove, it stops down there. Vegetation's everywhere. A temporary solution for me, with the big storm coming, would be to take the two pipes that are closest to where we are, which is Kent Road, sandbag 2 pipes, prevent the water from Pine Lake coming over to our side, because we're residential, we shouldn't really be getting that. And eventually sandbag down Kent to hold the water in. Temporary solution. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to the city attorney's report. Audrey.
Thank you. I have two items on the agenda. The first is the permission to advertise an ordinance for the Capital Improvement Program annual update. Part of your comprehensive plan, EAR, or evaluation and appraisal report, review, thank you, I knew I was going to mess up on that part, is that you now have a requirement to update your report review annually, And as a result of this, you can have the option of doing it internal with your comp plan and make it as a comp plan, or doing it as an individualized ordinance. The recommendation is, of course, to do it by individualized ordinance because it's a lot faster than trying to do a comprehensive plan amendment. Right now, you have a draft document for the 5-year capital improvement plan. It cannot be completed until we finish the budget cycle. So I'm not here today to talk about budget.
Okay.
Let's, right now, just process, and that is the little 3-page ordinance that you have, or 2-page ordinance that you have in front of you without the exhibits. So we can go and start doing this. This is a kickoff as our first year of doing it this way. What we'll do is Exhibit A will be modified as we go through the process, and during your budget hearings and after your last budget hearing, we will then take that last budget hearing, and I put September 21st, but that's incorrect. After your last budget hearing, what we'll do is change it on October 4th.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Aye.
Councilman
Aye.
Slapta. Councilman Flynn.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye. Okay.
The next item is required by statute, and so I will be reading from a script, so I make sure I say things correctly. So Mayor Simmons and City Council, I'd like to announce the following executive sessions. As you know, the city is a party to an administrative adversarial action entitled Angler's Paradise of Bonita Springs Incorporated versus City of Bonita Springs, Florida, in which a petition for a formal administrative hearing, Florida Division of Administrative Hearings, case number 17-003252GM, has been filed pursuant to Florida statutes section 286.011 subsection 8. I'm requesting that the City Council convene in a closed attorney-client session to discuss litigation and settlement strategies. Only the City Council, City Manager, City Attorney, and Special Land Use Counsel David Theriak will be in attendance. The session will be scheduled for Tuesday, September 19, 2017 at 4 p.m., the day before your regularly scheduled City Council meeting. The city is also a party to a lawsuit entitled BG Mine LLC versus City of Bonita Springs, Lee County Circuit Court case number 2017 CA 000381, and a petition for a formal hearing before the Division of Administrative Hearings. It's a case also entitled BG Mine LLC versus City of Bonita Springs, DOA case number 17-003871GM. Pursuant to Florida statutes section 286.011 subsection 8, I'm requesting that City Council convene a closed attorney-client session to discuss litigation and settlement strategies. Only the City Council, City Manager, City Attorney, and Special Land Use Counsel David Theriak will be in attendance. The session will be scheduled for Wednesday, September 20th, 2017 at 3 p.m., following your regularly scheduled City Council meeting on that date. Finally, the city is also party to a lawsuit entitled City of Bonita Springs versus WCI Communities et al., Lee County Circuit Court case number 2016 CA 4027, pursuant to Florida statute section 286.011 subsection 8. I'm requesting that City Council convene in a closed attorney-client session to discuss litigation and settlement strategies. Only the City Council, City Manager, City Attorney, and Special Land Use Counsel David Theriak will be in attendance. The session will be scheduled for Thursday, September 21st, 2017 at 9 a.m. That's the day after your regularly scheduled City Council meeting. The subject matter of these 3 meetings shall be confined to settlement negotiations or strategy sessions related to litigation expenditures. The entire sessions shall be recorded by a certified court reporter. The court reporter will record the time of commencement and termination of each session, all discussion and proceedings, the names of all persons present at any time, the names of all persons speaking. No portion of the session shall be off the record. The court reporter's notes shall be fully transcribed and filed with the city clerk within a reasonable time after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Audrey?
No, sir. I think
Audrey, what was the middle one, the 20th, what time?
as I understand, September 20th at 3 p.m. Your meeting begins at 9 a.m., so you probably will have a very long day that day.
There's nothing on the 19th? I thought
Yes, 19th is
19,
another
20,
case. That's,
21.
we're scheduling 3 different hearings.
Right.
3 dates. The 19th, it will start at 4 PM.
The 19th at 4, the
Uh-huh.
20th at 3, and the 21st at 9, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody got that?
Yep.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Yes,
Thanks so
and
much.
Council, you received an email,
Hmm?
and if we need anything else to provide invites to make sure it's on your schedule, we'll do so.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Audrey. Carl, City Manager's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just several items this evening. First off, A and B, monthly capital reports as well as financial reports have been submitted to the council. We stand ready for any questions.
Council? Okay.
Okay, no questions. C, back on August 16th, the council discussed the possibility, actually this was raised by Councilmember Forbes, of an alternate member to the Regional Planning Council. Staff was directed to check with them to see if an alternate member would be allowed. The answer is yes. So tonight, if the council wishes to appoint an alternate member to that board, you may do so.
So moved.
And who are you nominating?
Well, it's in the green sheet, isn't it?
Okay, but,
Mr. Forbes.
okay.
Yeah, I
That's
think
fine.
it's in the green sheet.
Yes.
Okay. I'll second that. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman Sakta.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Fred, I thought you were going to vote no on that.
I couldn't afford it.
We got him real quick.
Okay, so item D is the 11th Amendment to the agreement between the city and CH2M. We are recommending approval. As you will note, that there is changes in the dollar amounts, where basically, as a partner to the city, during our budget reduction times, they were able to use more of the building fund and less of the general fund. In funding themselves, they are also asking for a 3-year extension between, from their current 2018 expiration date, and staff is recommending approval.
Okay.
I make a motion to accept.
Okay, motion, and so I'll second that. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Aye.
Councilman
Aye.
Sakta. Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Thank you, council. Item E, staff would like to withdraw this evening in the interest of time and the fact that we're not as prepared as we thought we'd be due to storm issues that we've been dealing with.
Okay.
Sounds like.
Okay. The next item is item F, and that is not listed on your agenda, but it relates to the postponement of the budget hearing tomorrow, that is scheduled for tomorrow night. There's a couple of things here. Number one, not sure what the storm's going to do. Does council wish to cancel that meeting and reschedule it for another date? If you want to stay within the timeframes we already have, well, first off, do you want to cancel tomorrow night? Number one. Number two, if you want to do that, we can stay within the timeframes, and September 18th could actually be the date that you hold your budget public hearing. You could do that. Or the governor has just, well, actually, I'm sure with the governor's direction, the Department of Revenue has extended by 30 days from the date of the order, which was today, our timeline. And so we could actually push this probably no later than October 6th, certainly. So, and I haven't counted the days, so the 5th or 6th probably. So council's pleasure on how you'd like to handle it, given the storm situation and the timing restraints that we have.
Right. No, and, not that I would want to delay this, but I think, it's to send a message that we just passed a state of emergency this evening, but come to a budget meeting tomorrow to add your input, I think is a mixed message. I just don't think, I think in reality, knock on wood, we know the storm's not going to get here before tomorrow night. However, we have just ordered a state of emergency to, and for folks to get out of town if they can. So I just think in practicality and reality, I think we ought to move it. And one of the focal points of tonight's call was as well, the governor has extended a 30-day reprieve, so we're not up against it.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, is that all right?
So you're canceling tomorrow night. We will need to reschedule that meeting.
Right.
If you want to stay within the current timeframes that we've been working with, You could have a meeting on September 18th, right, Ann? Yeah, we'll have Ann come up.
Actually, the green sheet was quickly outdated when the information from the governor
Right.
was issued. And we can actually, and the 18th was picked based on the current law and advertising time. But the information came out this afternoon, limited the advertising time that between 2 and 5 days you advertise, and then
Right.
you can have the hearing.
Correct.
So I have a little calendar of some dates that would keep us, our final hearing at the same date and still allow extra time, if you'd like to go over that real quickly.
Sure, absolutely.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you.
Slow down, you move too fast.
The yellow highlighted dates are indicating when first of all, the tentative budget originally scheduled for the 7th. It could be rescheduled for the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and still be able to keep in our timeline to have our final budget hearing on the 26th. So any of those days during the week, it has to be after 5 p.m. If you were to choose the Saturday date, it can be any time on Saturday.
And I don't think that meeting should last very long, because it's really yes or no, right? On the
It's-
budget?
What
It's-
are the dates?
It's,
Ed
It's up
Valerian?
to-
I mean, it is a public hearing. There may be requests for additional
Requests for-
funds.
that's
Council
it.
may want to
Yeah.
consider those.
For me, I guess I'll just dive in here. The 13th would be the only possibility for next week, or the 13th, I shouldn't say the only. The 13th or the 16th would be the only
It's a
possibility.
Saturday.
Right, but it's here for a possible reschedule.
13th is good for me.
13th is good for me.
13th is good.
13th at 5:05, Ian?
Got it.
5:05.
Okay.
That had been a
Okay.
tentative one.
Right. Yes, so I think that
I
should
still
be
have that in
okay,
my
pretty good.
Really, we
So-
should be on schedule for the month?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Carl, I'm sorry.
On the 13th, the clerk has indicated here that, is that your outreach?
At 6
advisory
o'clock.
committee? At 6 o'clock?
Mhm.
Well, then that would limit council to a 55-minute meeting. Is that going to be okay with council?
Yeah.
Okay? Everybody
Yep,
good?
That'll work.
All right, that's fine. Good.
Great, thank you.
You could do your outreach a half an hour later, probably. plenty.
Right,
Yeah.
and they could see,
They
they
can
could
make
see how
public
the
comment.
sausage is
Right,
made, right?
exactly.
They could sit here and.
See what they're getting into.
Right. Okay, the 13th at 5:05, Ian.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Do we
Thank
get
you.
overtime pay for Saturday?
Saturday, we're not doing though.
Not doing Saturday,
That's funny.
doing 13th.
I guess
This is a right-to-work state,
people
Fred.
aren't working.
And the 26th remains the same, correct?
That is correct.
Great.
All right, and then the last two items under city manager's report will be Arlene's.
Wonderful, thank you, Earl. Arlene?
Good evening. We just wanted to make Mayor and Council aware that under our current contract for our CRS coordinator, we're looking for all opportunities that we can to acquire more points for our program. One of the opportunities we can take advantage of is becoming a certified storm-ready community. We do need to do that in partnership with the Bonita Springs Fire District, and we've already started beginning preliminary conversations with them about that. Chief Daigle has been in contact with our CRS coordinator. They will be the main force behind it. There's training sessions and other opportunities that would be all held at the fire district. It will eventually, once storm season is complete and it's in a downtime, require a field trip by the mayor and council to the state EOC, which we are appointed to the Tampa location. So that would be later in the year. This would secure additional 25 points for our CRS plan. And we also would then be a certified storm-ready community through the National Weather Center. Additionally, we did want to let you know that the Lee County DOT did reach out to staff, and the Public Works Director, members of Community Development staff, and myself met with Lee County DOT members regarding the letter that the mayor had provided to the county about the closure of the median in front of Hunter's Ridge. During that meeting, city staff, community development staff, was asked to provide specific information on potential traffic counts. And I've been clarified just recently with Jay Sweet that those traffic counts that they're asking for are actual trips that could be generated under the zoning uses that are permitted from I-75 to Bonita Grand. They would like these numbers so that they can quantify the need for the signal at Trade Center, Trade 2, number 2 was where, Tradeway 2 is the street that they said would require a signal. The idea is that the trips generated on these parcels would then create a proportionate fair share, which is above and beyond impact fees for the future security of the funding of that signal. We wanted to make council and mayor fully aware that they've asked for those numbers prior to doing that because in the past there's been an issue with numbers provided, and we wanted to make sure that that was appropriately notified to you all as well first.
So it's only the numbers from Bonita Grand to...
I clarified that with, that would be what we're looking at. And also, from what I understand, there's another study going on currently at the numbers at Bonita Grand for the potential of the there's potential studies of development there for the connection there. We're only going to be looking at what's approved uses and zoning for those numbers there. That's what we'd be looking for. We're not, from what I understand. So if
And
any
we're not
other...
agreeing to the proportionate fair share now, you're just talking about numbers.
No, they've asked for numbers. What I understand the next step was is the county would be asking for an interlocal agreement between the city and the county on that closure, who would be funding what and how those promotions, that would be a next step in that. But we wanted to make clear that that request was made.
Okay, great.
And
Fred? I'm sorry, yeah, Arlene, hang on a second.
One question. Since there's a lot of vacant land that's zoned out there, are they going to add some kind of projection for the potential trips from those? Like, for example, there's a light industrial park that's already a zone, and it's already, the DO's in for the first section, but it'll eventually have more buildings in it, and you got the Horizon Park, which we're all familiar with, which will be generating a lot of trips. Is that going to get cranked into this some way?
so what they were asking for is the actual allowable trips for those parcels. So that would be all.
Okay. So it will-
But we do need to be clear that when developers come in later on down the road, they most likely will be hiring consultants to do independent traffic
Yeah.
studies. So they'll be concerned about the dollar amount that they're required to provide in that proportionate fair share.
Right.
So, but that's a separate process of that, so.
No problem.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I just have a question. In the past, when we provided some traffic information in that area, we had done some projections, so
Right.
we're not going to run into the same problem, are we?
These are, we're limit, this area is limited to I-75 east to Bonita Grand. But those are, I want to make those clear, they're projections based on allowable land uses. So it's, if John wants to clarify a little bit further, he can.
As part of some of the requests, developers have actually done counts in the area. Those counts, along with the zoning request information, or the traffic portion of that request, is going to be submitted to the county with your authorization. So it's going to be based upon those real count numbers. When we're talking about any projections, those are really secondary. The discussion for Burnwood with the new development pattern that they're looking for, and with the rezoning of Horizon Park, the county started realizing it was time to seriously consider the installation of the light at Tradeway 2. That was always the plan as traffic volumes increased along that section of Bonita Beach Road. They're looking at these numbers not necessarily from a design perspective, but they're trying to figure out a formulation for recouping the cost of this new signal. And so with this information, that's the intent or the current use of it. They want to know who's going to pay, how much they can expect from different users. I think they told us they've looked at several different models, whether it be trip generation, whether it be square footage. They're not sure what's going to be best in this area. Without this information, that it's going to be very difficult for them to make a determination. So we told them we would run this by you, obviously, and go from there.
So you don't anticipate any difficulties?
Well,
And unintended consequences, which I think is what happened the last time.
whatever consequences are based in the real numbers are based in the real numbers. The projections are where I would want to be very conservative with them. We would simply be providing them information that was provided to us. There would not be a study that was done by the city of Bonita Springs that we have endorsed. We would simply recognize that this was a traffic study that was supplied as part of a rezoning request, and use it for that purpose. Any additional use, I think, we can limit exposure.
Thank you.
But for true traffic counts, though, I think that the numbers are what the numbers
Right,
are.
exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Council? Okay.
Well,
Yes.
Last, I'd like to announce that you've also received a email earlier today that and also our acting director of neighborhood services declared that we are in phase 3 mobilization. City Hall and all city facilities, all city activities will be closed as of Friday. Of course, essential personnel will be reporting to their duties as per the city's emergency management plan. We will be hardening City Hall, preparing for storm preparations, so there'll be limited access to here. There'll be just the folks who are required to be here. We'll be making precautionary features on all of our facilities and hardening all of those structures down. Our Parks and Rec Department has already started that process on city facilities. So regular business will cease on Friday, and then pending all when it's safe and secure as declared by the EOC, we will then be reaching out to our employees and beginning up services only once it's safe and secure for those folks to come back.
Right, right. Thank you. Bless you. Council, anything else for?
Arlene is sitting up here in council. What can we as a council do to help the city staff, if anything at all? Or probably stay away.
Stay
You know?
Stay safe, stay away. We'll do our best to keep you informed of every process that goes forward, but just keeping yourself and your family safe and everybody staying off the roads and staying put and hardening down for the storm is the best thing we can do. The less folks out and about is the best, and everybody, if they can evacuate, they should be evacuating. And we're taking all the precautions here at staff that we can do so, and all non-essential personnel should be preparing their own emergency management plans and doing that as well.
And Carl, thank you for the updates again. They really help out a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. Wonderful, thanks. We'll move on to mayor and council member reports. Amy, start down there.
None, just I want to extend my appreciation for the efforts of the staff in this recent emergency and anything that they're going to extend to our people going forward. And it's great to be working with the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Nicely put, Amy, and I will ditto that. And obviously, the 9/11 is the ceremony is closed down, as you've already indicated, so.
Great.
We're good to go.
Thank you. Pete?
Yeah, triple ditto. I just had one other, so thank you. One other thing, though, which is, there's enough going on right now, but maybe for the next meeting and the one after that. We did have this notice of, I guess it's called public notice of pollution of 8.8 million gallons of refuse, reuse effluent spilled out in the DRGR. And I know you sent a response to what I said, but I'd like to get a little better handle on that in terms of, it doesn't have to happen today, but how do we deal with that in the future so it doesn't happen again as much as possible? And a related issue is, which we've touched on in the past, which is all the septic systems out there, including ones that, you know, we were in a position where we had to okay a few months ago new septic systems in an area that the aerial photographs has shown is large parts of which are underwater. So this is not something that can happen in a day or two, but it almost relates a little bit to what Fred proposed before. But I'd like to just get a better handle on that, not tonight, but at the appropriate time.
So it might be appropriate to have a representative of BSU to come here?
I don't presume to tell private companies what they should be doing. I would ask if you can figure it out and report back to us. That's fine by me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know?
Great. Thanks, Pete.
You wouldn't object to BSU coming, though,
Oh,
right?
of course not, but they're a
Because I
private.
suspect they'd want to talk about it.
But they're a private company, and I don't want to tell them what to do. But if they want to come, it's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Fred?
Want to bring up one thing, but before I do that, I want to ask Audrey a question.
Yes, sir.
If any of us, let's say that this, God forbid, this storm comes and causes flooding and all that in the city again, or damage, do we not have the right to access to any gated community in this city? Under the auspices, we're in there looking at flooding, we're looking at damage to structures.
Are you talking about staff qualified to be doing these inspections, such as the building official?
Well, yeah, and I'd like to think that an architect and engineer is eminently qualified to look at both.
I know there would be no problem with Vanderbilt Lakes.
Well, I have in mind another place.
I would prefer to review it as to the actual individual and whether or not the person is acting in their capacity for the city.
Yeah.
As to whether or not it would qualify.
Okay.
If that, I
Be
may have
simple.
time to research that.
Now, between now and the next meeting, I will be sending out a draft of that evaluation form. The storm and a couple other things got in its way, but I want to bring up one thing. One of the things that I learned out of the first one was that you really don't want to have in any one main category more than 4 to 6 items that you're evaluating. I've been consistently told once you go beyond that 6, not saying you couldn't have a 7, but the interest of the evaluator rapidly falls off. He or she would rather finish that area up and go to something else, might have the overflow in it under another name. And I did come up with an idea. I wanted to just throw it out. You can react to it tonight, or I thought there might be an interest because we all have different things that we think are the hot item of the evaluation period. Something may be far more important to me than it is to Councilman O'Flynn or Stephen Schlotka or Amy. I was thinking about adding optionally for anyone to use it, 2 blank areas that you could fill in what you want and score it as however you want. That way, if the thing doesn't cover something that happened, but you can put your own words in, and it doesn't, since we're not going to end up with a average score and all that stuff, I think anyone here could make it work. You're not required to fill them in, but if there's something you want to fill in, you fill it in on that line.
Off the top of my head, I think that makes sense, because the whole concept of the process is to give feedback.
Yeah.
You're giving feedback is what
Right,
you're saying.
yeah. Mhm. Okay, very good.
Great, thanks, Fred.
Move to approve the minutes.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, I got something.
I got some things to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I ducked out for a few minutes and just wanted to give some updates. If you've heard this information, I do apologize. The governor did indicate that there have been 2 deaths in the Caribbean so far. The Florida Keys are evacuating. Traffic seems to be moving pretty well up Route 1. Citizens have been air-vac'd out of the Keys. I think that was in coordination with the North Carolina National Guard. There are folks certainly that don't want to leave, but there are people that are obviously leaving in big numbers. The models still show that there could be a West Coast hit. There are models that still show it could be the center part of the state, and there are still models, obviously, that are trending east. But by no means are we out of the woods. I don't want to ring the bell. I don't want to sound the bell, but the bell has been rung, and I want people to take cover and evacuate if they can. There are a couple of apps that are good for folks. One of the big questions that I continue to hear is what gas stations have gas, what gas stations are out, what can we do? There was a website that I gave out previously, and Laura's going to include this in tomorrow's update. It's www.gasbuddy.com, gasbuddy.com, and there's a mobile application for your phone that you can download, gasbuddy.com as well. Obviously, we discussed the budget process, so that's good. And the bottom line is the governor and everybody on his team and on his staff stand at the ready. They've handed out personal cell phone numbers for the governor and his top staff. They're hands-on. They are diving in head first, so to speak, literally and figuratively. The Attorney General, Fish and Wildlife, Surgeon General, everybody. Everybody is ready to react accordingly. So if any citizen needs any information, please contact us. We will get that disseminated. We are going to continue with the email updates. We are going to, obviously, we've discussed tonight, get out notices on Bonita Springs TV. And God bless the Naples Daily News. I want to throw a shout out to them and for their coverage, for helping disseminate information. And Tad, if anything you need to do with any of your editors or anybody moving forward to help disseminate information, please. Thank you for what you've done. This is not a, wait for the banner to come out type situation. So anything you'll be doing daily, buddy, I just thank you in advance for the dissemination of information and sharing that with the Fort Myers News Press as well. So just we can get the information out. There is another situation where a lot of the counties statewide, I don't know firsthand if it's our situation, there's plenty of sand, but not necessarily sandbags. So if anybody runs into that problem, please let us know. And I just want to hats off to so many people that were here tonight. And moving forward, just there are a lot, you see what makes a community tick, and you see the good in people at a time like this. And I'm just,
Amen.
God bless, overrun with emotion for what I saw in this city the past week. So thank you, everybody, and God bless you, and be safe. So now we will move to the approval of the minutes, Mr. Schlachta. Okay, and I'll second that. So moved. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Councilman Slakta.
Aye.
Mayor Simmons.
Aye.
Councilman O'Flynn.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes.
Aye.
Councilwoman Caramba.
Okay, public comment. Members of the public that would like to speak at this time?
Yeah, Rick Steinmeier. Somewhere along the line, I was at a meeting where they were discussing that new Big Carlos Pass Bridge, and I just got the impression they were going to build a high overpass. It affects us in that we come on to Lover's Key, I believe it is, and they won't let us, from what I understand, we got stopped from doing any changes along the corridor or the causeway through there by Dog Beach and stuff because of this, what they're going to be doing with that bridge. So I think we really do need to get on that as Amy has proposed, to find out what impact it's going to have on Lover's Key and Black Island there with Lover's. Those high rises there, the whole neighborhood. So, thank you very much, and God bless America.
Thank you, Rick. Other members of the public? Councilman Alex Grant, good evening.
Yes, good evening again. I'm going to now emphasize the importance when I was on the city council and Martha was on the city council, we passed a resolution for passenger rail service, and one of the items was the importance of having another way of emergency removal of people in case of a hurricane. And if we would have a major storm coming from the west towards us, and we have a situation where we have the interstate highway as it is now blocked in the Sarasota area, and I believe Port Charlotte area, there are delays of about 25 minutes or so, at least there were. We needed to have passenger rail service between this area and let's say Sanford, Florida. And so in that light, I would propose that we seriously consider doing something like in the northeast corridor where you have a rail system, passenger rail system between Boston and Portland, Maine. I think they call it a Downeaster. We could have one named the Hurricaner, which would be very appropriate for us.
Thank you, Alex. Other members of the public? Hi, Kathy.
Good evening. For the record, Kathy McGrath. After listening to Arlene talk about the CRS plan, I think I've commented on this before. I hope all residents here realize and appreciate all the hard work that staff is doing, and I'm sure a lot of it's Arlene, to get us higher points, which gives us a bigger discount on our flood insurance, because as you can well imagine, I live on the river, yes, I pay a horrendous amount, but I believe I had a between $800 and $900 discount due to the work of staff. And so I appreciate it very much, and I hope residents, if they look at their FEMA bill, those that are in the flood zone, appreciate the fact of the hard work that's done, because let's face it, that's a substantial amount of money. So thank you, Arlene.
Thank you. Other members of the public that would like to speak? Yes, hello again.
My cap up and my description of possibilities to correct the situation temporarily with Pine Lake and Terry Street. I want to extend an invitation to anybody who's interested. I'd be glad to meet with you, take you on a little tour, show you what I've seen. Matt Feeney was good enough to come out and visit with me about a week ago when we talked a little bit. I've gathered some more information since then, and if anybody's interested, you can contact my city council member, Mr. Forbes, and set up the time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if somebody from the staffs of our team could share his information, that would be great. Thanks so much. Other members of the public wishing to speak? Council, anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn? We are adjourned. Good evening.